Chapter 995. Wei Tianxing's words sent chills down Gao Yunquin's spine. He prostrated himself on the ground, feeling as if the entire world had abandoned him. When they saw this scene, everyone in the hall was dumbstruck. They felt as if they were dreaming, and it was so unreal. Gao Yunquin was Gao Tianyi's son, yet he was reprimanded to kneel on the ground. Who would believe this? It went without saying that Miss Lu had a powerful background that even Gao Tianyi had no choice but to bow down to her. Gao Tianyi looked at Miss Lu and smiled apologetically. "Miss Lu, how do you think we should handle this matter?" Miss Lu looked at Lin Sun and said, "Child Lin, what do you think?" Swoosh! All eyes in the hall fell on Lin Sun. Only now did they suddenly realize that this child Lin was the key to everything. Gao Yunquin, Wei Tianxing, and the attendants and guards wished they could slap themselves when they thought of how they had treated child Lin. If they had known this earlier, how would they dare to treat this young master like this? Forget it, this matter ends here. Lin Sun knew when to stop. He could tell that Miss Lu and Gao Tianyi seemed to be related, and he did not want Miss Lu to completely offend Gao Tianyi. Gao Tianyi felt relieved at Lin Sun's words. He said gratefully, "Child's benevolence is truly admirable." Everyone else heaved a sigh of relief. They were worried that Lin Sun would do as he said and tear down the heavenly tower. As for the guests, they felt as if their horizons had been broadened. However, they could not help but feel curious. Who was this Miss Lu that she could force someone like Gao Tianyi to bow his head? And who was this child Lin? It seemed that even Miss Lu respected him. This was too unbelievable. Could he be a peerless figure from some ancient orthodoxy? If Miss Lin knew that these guests treated Lin Sun as a so-called peerless figure, she would not know whether to laugh or cry. After all, countless peerless figures had died in the hands of demon god Lin. Heavenly Tower, VIP Hall. Gao Tianyi arranged a lavish banquet for Lin Sun, Miss Lu, and Xiao He. Gao Tianyi's face was full of smiles, and his witty words were like pearls of pearls during the banquet. Just from his appearance, it was impossible to tell that he was depressed or sad. After all, Lin Sun had killed a half-step king realm expert beside him in public, but now he was talking and laughing with Lin Sun as if nothing had happened. Lin Sun had to admire his shrewdness and self-control. However, it could also be seen that compared to the death of a half-step king, Gao Tianyi cared more about his relationship with Miss Lu. At the very least, at the banquet, Gao Tianyi, who could be said to be a big shot in Jade Flame City, was like a subject meeting a queen. In reality, Gao Tianyi was also suffering in his heart, but he didn't dare to show it. "Do you think that young Master Lin is using my identity to intimidate others?" Suddenly, Miss Li's voice sounded in his ears, startling Gao Tianyi. "How would I dare? Miss, please don't test me. I swear that I will never bear a grudge against young Master Lin." Gao Tianyi hurriedly transmitted his voice to Miss Lu, but he muttered in his heart, "Isn't this intimidating? I might as well be straightforward. If I weren't here today, it would be a small matter if your Tianyi Tower was demolished. With your Gao family's background in Jade Flame City, I'm afraid you wouldn't be able to withstand young Master Lin's anger. As for his background, you'd better not inquire about it," Miss Lu said casually. Gao Tianyi was shocked and realized that something was wrong. He said with a solemn expression, "Thank you for your advice." When he looked at Lin Sun again, his eyes had changed. He knew Miss Li's identity. She came from a sacred place, and her status was frighteningly high. But this young Master Lin was valued so highly by her. This was not simple. After the banquet, Miss Lu found Lin Sun for a private chat. "If everything goes well, I will leave tomorrow," Miss Lu said with a smile. "I'm afraid I won't have time to say goodbye to you then." Lin Sun was startled and said, "Can you tell me your name before I leave?" "Look Kai Wei." Miss Li's red lips were moist, revealing a meaningful smile. "I knew you would ask this. There's no need to hide it from you now. I come from the heavenless sect of the mystic spirit mountain in the sacred place. After I return to my sect, I will probably come out again when the great era comes." Mystic Spirit Mountain, the heavenless sect. This was a completely unfamiliar existence to Lin Sun. But when he heard the two words heavenless, he couldn't help but be shocked. What kind of ancient and powerful orthodoxy would dare to use heavenless as its name? Don't forget the Great Way potential king token I gave you. After you enter the Tianjiao Golden List, you should really consider joining a sect. After all, in this great era, any peerless figure who wants to set foot on the peak of the king's realm absolutely cannot do without the support of the power of a sect. If you rely on yourself to fight for it, it's too difficult. Lu Kaiwei warned him seriously. Moreover, your greatest enemy is Yun Qingbai. Behind him stands the Heavenly Sword Sect. This is an ancient orthodoxy that is second to none in the East Victory domain. If you want to kill Yun Qingbai, you are destined to face the threat of the Heavenly Sword Sect. Lin Sun nodded. He had thought about this problem more than once. But for now, he didn't intend to join any sect. In addition, you also have to be on guard against the revenge from the Sacred Fire Sect. The Sacred Fire Sect is rooted in Ally country and has an amazing origin. It can be regarded as a real orthodoxy. In terms of foundation, it is not inferior to any ancient orthodoxy in the world. Because of me, you became enemies with the Sacred Fire Sect. It was not my intention, but it has happened. In the future, I will try my best to help you solve this potential threat. At the end of her words, a trace of determination flashed in Lu Kaiwei's clear eyes. I don't worry about this. I have offended many forces. One more Sacred Fire Sect is nothing, Lin Sun said with a smile. Lu Kaiwei was stunned, and then burst into laughter. I forgot that you were the famous demon Lin in the West Hung world. The next morning, an old man and a young man appeared in front of the Tianyi Pavilion. The old man's hair was snow white, and he looked like an immortal. His skin was as smooth as a baby's. He held a horsetail whisk in his hand, and his breath was calm. The young man, on the other hand, had a dignified appearance. He had long, light, cyan hair, and his eyes were intertwined with blazing flames. He was extremely intimidating. He stood there casually, yet every single move he made carried a sharp and arrogant aura of supremacy, causing him to seem extremely conspicuous. In the nearby area, anyone who looked at the young man felt a stinging pain in their eyes as soon as they saw him. It was as if they had seen a grand sun burning wantonly, shining with boundless radiance. Gao Tianyi had already come to greet them. When he saw the old man, the behind-the-scenes leader of the Tianyi Pavilion, a powerful figure in Jade Flame City, trembled all over, and his face showed deep awe. He was about to kneel down and kowtow when the old man stopped him. Don't stand on ceremony. I'm just here to pick up the young lady. You can skip the formalities. His voice was gentle and flat, but every word was like the sonorous voice of the Great Way, with a power that could not be disobeyed. Senior, please come in. Gao Tianyi hurriedly ushered the old man and the young man into the Tianyi Pavilion. During this process, his heart was pounding. He had never expected that the one who came to pick up Miss Lu would be this powerful old man. In a distinguished guest hall, Lu Kaiwei had been waiting there for a long time. Lin Sun was also there. They were going to part ways today, so he had to see his friend off no matter what. Uncle Ku Jing. Lu Kaiwei was a little surprised when she saw the old man with snow-white hair and beard who looked like an immortal. Kaiwei, after receiving your message yesterday, I was afraid that something might happen again, so I came in person, the old man said with a smile. Junior sister Kaiwei, I heard that your cultivation source was injured by those bastards of the Sacred Fire Sect in order to obtain the Sacred Fire Source Stone. The young man with long, light cyan hair walked up to her with a concerned expression. How are you? Are you all right? Senior Brother Yang? Why are you here? Lu Kaiwei was surprised. When I heard that you were injured yesterday, I couldn't wait to rush to your side. The young man did not hide his concern as he stared at Lu Kaiwei with burning eyes. However, before he could finish, Miss Lu interrupted him and changed the topic. Senior Brother Yang, Uncle Ku Jing, let me introduce you. This is Child Lin's son. It's all thanks to his help that I was able to cross the Boundary River and escape from the Sacred Fire Sect. As she spoke, she turned to Lin's son and said, Child Lin, this is Uncle Ku Jing and Senior Brother Yang Tianchi. I'm Lin's son. Nice to meet you. Lin's son cupped his hands in greeting. He already knew that these two must be from the heavenless sect of Xianling Mountain, just like Lu Kaiwei. Ku Jing's eyes were as deep as the ocean. When he glanced at Lin Sun, Lin Sun felt as if all his secrets had been seen through. This caused his heart to tremble, and he realized that this old man was definitely an extraordinary figure. Fortunately, Ku Jing quickly retracted his gaze and nodded with a smile. Your aura is as strong as the abyss, and your cultivation is as majestic as the sea. You're a pretty good young man. You're destined to have a place in the great era battle in the future. Senior, you're flattering me. Lin Sun was even more shocked. This old man seemed to have seen through his cultivation at a glance. Uncle Ku Jing has already passed 7 of the 9 tribulations of longevity. He could be considered a 7th tribulation king. Since he said so, it must be true, Lu Kaiwei said with a smile. Yang Tianqi, who had long light cyan hair, snorted coldly. His gaze towards Lin Sun was intertwined with dazzling divine flames. It was extremely terrifying. Junior Sister Lu, you said that this guy helped you deal with the Sacred Fire sect pursuit. Chapter 996. Lu Kaiwei frowned. I saw it with my own eyes. Could it be false? Lin Sun was lost in thought. He was keenly aware that this guy named Yang Tianqi seemed to be hostile to him. Was it because of Miss Lu beside him? What you see may not be true. It's very easy to judge. As Yang Tianqi spoke, he suddenly stepped out and pointed his fingers at Lin Sun's eyebrows. This was very sudden, and probably no one had expected that Yang Tianqi would actually attack without any warning. This also showed how domineering and solitary his nature was. Crack! Yang Tianqi's palm was slender and white. His fingers were sharp and dazzling, like a flash of lightning in the void, fierce and direct. The void was torn apart. The distance between him and Lin Sun was less than 5 feet, and he suddenly attacked at this time. No one would have time to react. Even Lin Sun didn't expect it. When he reacted, Yang Tianqi's fingers had already approached the place between his eyebrows. The bright flame at the fingertip gathered the purest and most condensed sword intent, which seemed to be able to pierce through everything. There was no doubt that Yang Tianqi's combat power was extremely terrifying. Even if it was a sudden attack, such a terrifying finger was not something that ordinary people could perform. At this critical moment, Lin Sun suddenly retreated. At the same time, he grasped the air with his fingers like a lotus seal and knocked forward. At that moment, it was like a black lotus was born in the void and blocked the finger at an incredible speed. Bang! The collision between the two burst into dazzling brilliance. Lin Sun stepped back. On the back of his right hand, there was a straight blood mark from which a drop of blood was flowing. After all, Lin Sun was caught off guard. Even if he managed to block it, his hand was inevitably scratched. A trace of coldness flashed in his black eyes. If he had reacted a little slower, the consequences would have been absolutely unimaginable. Hey, you can block my attack? Yang Tianqi seemed to be very surprised. He raised his eyebrows, with flames surging in his eyes and long cyan hair flying in the air. His momentum was like that of an overbearing god. Take another blow, he shouted. Stop. Lu Caiwei's expression was gloomy and icy cold as she berated. Junior Sister Lu, why is that? I'm helping you probe this person's background so that you don't know that you've been deceived. Yang Tianqi said helplessly. Even though he spoke in this way, his movements weren't slow at all. His figure was like a bolt of lightning as he transformed his fingers into a palm, and then he suddenly slapped it out in space. Bang! Wind and lightning surged, and an expanse of fiery light soared into the sky, condensing into a palm print that incinerated the void. The might was so great that it shattered all the furnishings in the hall into powder, and an ear-piercing explosion resounded. This strike was clearly stronger than before. At the same time, Lin Sun also moved. Although the previous blow was only a superficial wound, which was neither painful nor itchy, this blow made him furious. This was the first time they had met, and they had never interacted with each other before. Yet, the other party attacked as he pleased. How could they tolerate such a domineering and arrogant attitude? If he hadn't reacted in time, What would the consequences have been? So at this moment, Lin Sun was also angry. Boom! He pressed his palm into the void and deduced the mysteries of the fiery galaxy, and a flaming galaxy spread out in the void. However, before the two of them could exchange blows, the old man, Ku Jing's figure suddenly appeared between them and waved his sleeve. A vast and unstoppable force of the great path spread out and instantly dissolved the attacks of the two of them without a trace. Martial Uncle Ku Jing, what are you doing? Yang Tianqi frowned in confusion. Lin Sun sighed in his heart. He was also a little unhappy, but he knew that this battle was destined to be difficult to continue. Tianqi, you're being rude. Ku Jing's expression was gentle, but there was an indescribable majesty in it. This isn't how the Skyless sect treats its guests. Yang Tianqi's eyes flickered, and he said, I'm just being kind. I'm just thinking about junior sister Lo. Yang Tianqi, since when did I ask you to think about me? Lu Caiwei's face was as cold as frost. She was also angry. You sneak attack my friend in front of me. Is that your kindness? Yang Tianqi hurriedly explained, Junior sister Lu, don't misunderstand me. I really didn't mean that. You should know how I feel about you. No matter what I do, it's for your own good. He obviously cared about Lu Caiwei's attitude. However, Lu Caiwei's face was cold, and she didn't pay attention to him anymore. This made him feel a little embarrassed, so he looked at Lin Sun more and more unpleasantly. It seemed ridiculous, but in Yang Tianqi's view, he was just testing Lin Sun's background. Lu Caiwei was angry with him because of this, which made him very unhappy. Lin Sun, I'm very sorry about what happened just now. Lu Caiwei apologized to Lin Sun with a trace of regret. It's okay. It has nothing to do with you, Lin Sun said with a smile. Let me treat your wound. Lu Caiwei took out a bottle of ointment and took Lin Sun's hand to treat the bloodstain on the back of his hand. Lin Sun couldn't refuse, so he could only let her do it. However, this scene caused Ku Jing to be slightly stunned, and he couldn't help but look at Lin Sun with a trace of surprise. In his impression, Lu Caiwei had never been so concerned about any man. Yang Tianqi's face instantly turned gloomy when he saw this scene. His heart was burning with jealousy, and his eyes, which were intertwined with flames, were filled with coldness. Before leaving, Lu Caiwei took Xiao He, Ku Jing, and Yang Tianqi to a purple copper-treasured ship. Mr. Lin, take care. Lu Caiwei looked back and smiled sweetly. Her clear and beautiful face was dazzling under the sunlight. Big brother Lin, if there's a chance in the future, Xiao He will definitely visit you. Xiao He waved her arm. She was a little reluctant. Lin Sun smiled and waved his hand. You guys take care too. Let's go. Ku Jing steered the treasured ship and took them into the sky. Almost at the same time, Yang Tianqi's cold voice suddenly rang in Lin Sun's ears. You'd better remember that you don't deserve junior sister Lu with your status. If you dare to pester junior sister Lu again, I will kill you with my own hands. There was an undisguised threat in his voice. Lin Sun narrowed his eyes slightly. When he looked over, he saw Yang Tianqi standing on the treasured ship high up in the sky, looking down at him. His fiery eyes were filled with disdain and menacing. Swoosh! The treasured ship broke through the clouds and disappeared into the horizon. Lin Sun withdrew his gaze and silently remembered Yang Tianqi's name. Senior Gao. Lin Sun suddenly called out. Gao Tianyi, who was standing beside him, waved his hand and said, You flatter me, mister. Just tell me what you need. I want to make a deal with you. Lin Sun remembered that most of the items he had stored on him were no longer useful, so he might as well exchange them for spiritual essence. A deal? Gao Tianyi was stunned. Yes, a big deal, Lin Sun joked. Let's see if the Tianyi Pavilion can afford it. Gao Tianyi laughed and said, Mr. Lin, there's nothing in Jade Flame City that the Heavenly Tower can't afford. His words were full of confidence and heroic spirit. However, it did not take long before he froze and his body stiffened. In the appraisal hall of the Heavenly Tower, over a dozen appraisers were busy appraising the prices of various treasures. Beside them, an attendant was recording one piece of Cloud Dragon Jade, worth 800 mid-grade spiritual essence, 19 green smoke jadeite stones, worth 6,000 mid-grade spiritual essence, 9 heaven-grade spiritual swords, worth 2,000 upper-grade spiritual essence. The voices of these people recording the prices kept ringing out in the following hours. Gao Tianyi, on the other hand, had no time to pay attention to these things. His heart trembled as he looked at the pile of treasures that was as tall as a small hill. There were all kinds of treasures, including treasures, spiritual materials, elixirs, and so on. Ores, spiritual herbs. Not only were there a lot of treasures, but the quantity was also astonishing. With Gao Tianyi's shrewd eyes, he could easily tell that most of these treasures were trophies, looted from different cultivators. In particular, many of them were treasures that could only be used by half-step King Realm cultivators. Didn't this mean that more than one half-step King Realm cultivator had died in the hands of this Mr. Lin? At this thought, Gao Tianyi could not help but feel shocked. He had to admit that as Miss Li's friend, this Mr. Lin was definitely a ruthless character. But soon, Gao Tianyi had no time to think about this, because when the appraisers tallied up the prices of all the treasures, he was dumbfounded. 190,000 upper-grade spiritual essences. This was not just an astronomical figure. It was more than enough to buy 5 or 6 supreme weapons of Emperor Path. No matter how rich the Heavenly Tower was, it was impossible for them to take out so many spiritual essences at once. When he thought of how he had boasted in front of Lin Sun, Gao Tianyi's expression immediately became embarrassed. He really could not afford such a big deal in a short time. Mister, why don't you choose some treasures from the Heavenly Tower to offset some of the spiritual essences? Gao Tianyi suggested. Is there anything special here? Lin Sun asked. He had already checked. Although there were many treasures in the Heavenly Tower, only a few of them could be of use to him. Special. Gao Tianyi pondered for a moment. Then his eyes suddenly lit up. Mister, are you interested in the Stone Appraisal Convention? Stone Appraisal Convention? Lin Sun was startled. Yes, as you know, a shocking change has taken place in the Boundary River recently, especially in the Chaotic Stars Shoal, where a large number of meteorites have been unearthed. According to Gao Tianyi's explanation, the so-called Stone Appraisal Convention was a grand meeting to identify and dissect the meteorites. Those who wanted to participate in the convention only needed to pay an entrance fee. Then they could enter the venue and select the meteorites. Once the selected meteorites were dissected, no matter what treasures were found, they would all belong to the owner. Recently, a lot of amazing treasures had appeared in the Stone Appraisal Convention. When the news spread out, it attracted a lot of practitioners to participate in the event every day. It could be said to be a grand meeting of a new kind, and the Heavenly Tower was one of the organizers of this convention. Chapter 997. Finally, Lin Sun agreed. At the bottom of the lake in a random star shoal, Lin Sun had dug out 3 miraculous king herbs, which was an immeasurable harvest. Since the Stone Appraisal Convention was related to the meteorites, Lin Sun wanted to try his luck. Gao Tianyi was very happy. Soon, he collected 150,000 pieces of top-grade spiritual marrow for Lin Sun and gave him a token. With this token, Lin could choose a star remains meteorite worth no more than 40,000 pieces of top-grade spiritual essence to dissect at the Star Inspecting Convention. Gao Tianyi had intended to send someone to accompany Lin Sun, but Lin Sun refused. Lin Sun left the Tianyi Tower at noon. The venue of the convention was located in the suburbs, adjacent to the Boundary River. It was a large garden. Recently, because of the shocking changes in the Boundary River, Azure Flame City had become very lively. Practitioners from all over the world came to the city every day. Walking on the bustling street at this time, Lin Sun could feel this very clearly. Have you heard that Chu Beihai, the current holy son of the heaven's pivot holy land, will arrive here in the afternoon to participate in the convention? No way. This peerless figure has come out of seclusion? I heard that it's because a strange stone appeared in the convention and attracted Chu Beihai's attention. On the street, the name Chu Beihai was being discussed everywhere. It was hard not to attract Lin Sun's attention. Azure Flame City was just a remote city in the ancient Song province, while the heaven's pivot holy land was second to none in the ancient Song province. Moreover, the heavens pivot Holy Land was also very famous and influential in the entire Dongxing territory. Its profound background could be traced back to the ancient times. As the current Holy Son of the heavens pivot Holy Land, Chu Beihai was naturally an outstanding figure in the ancient Song province. Lin Sun didn't need to inquire about Chu Beihai. He only needed to learn some information about Chu Beihai from the discussions. He was born with extraordinary talent and excellent innate talent. He started cultivating at the age of 3 and became a disciple of a reclusive old man in the heavens pivot Holy Land. At the age of 15, he had already stepped into the reincarnation developing realm. Since then, he had become one of the most dazzling talents of the young generation in the ancient Song province. His battle prowess was also extremely terrifying. The Big Dipper Heaven's center scripture that he cultivated was mysterious and unfathomable. Its offensive power was shocking. It was a true treasured scripture of the Great Path. It was rumored that a genius like Chu Beihai would definitely be able to occupy a place on the Prodigy Gold leaderboard when the Great Era arrived. This evaluation was shocking. The East Victory region is so large that it covers 19,000 prefectures, and it's the quintessence of the region of ancient desolation. There are countless ancient sects standing towering there, and geniuses are like carps in a river that are innumerable. Perhaps this Chu Beihai can be called peerless, but his influence is probably only limited to a few prefectures. Suddenly, Lin Sun heard an old man's comment. If he can be on the Tianjiao Golden List when the Great Era comes, there is only hope. With a single glance, one could tell that this old man was extraordinary. His bearing seemed to be amiable, but there was an invisible kind of great majesty about him. If one didn't sense it carefully, one wouldn't be able to notice it. Old man, your words are a bit exaggerated. Then who do you think can be said to be renowned throughout the world within the younger generation of the Eastern Victory world and isn't limited to a few prefectures? Someone was displeased and muttered. The old man smiled faintly. There are many famous people in the young generation, such as Wang Xuanyu, the successor of the Tai Taoism, Mi Hongjin, the successor of the Sun Moon Temple, Yi Mo, the successor of the Origin sect. When the name Wang Xuanyu was mentioned, there was a sound of gasping nearby, and many practitioners' faces changed. When they heard the name Mi Hongjin, the expressions of the practitioners changed with unconcealable shock. And when they heard the name Yi Mo, the atmosphere in the field became much quieter. Lin Sun, who had just arrived in Dongxing territory, knew nothing about this vast world regarded as the home of saints and knew nothing about it. So when he heard these 3 names, he didn't feel anything at all. But when he noticed the changes in the expressions of the practitioners nearby, he immediately realized that these 3 names probably represented 3 peerless figures who were famous enough to shake the East Victory region. How do you think these 3 people compare with Chu Beihai? The old man looked indifferent. Everyone was speechless and silent. The Tai Taoism was located in the easternmost part of the East Victory region, but the name of its successor Wang Xuanyu could spread to the westernmost ancient Song province, which showed that this person was extraordinary. In addition, Mi Hongjin, the successor of the Sun Moon Temple, and Yi Mo, the successor of the Origin sect, were not inferior to Wang Xuanyu. Compared with these 3 people, Chu Beihai's reputation was a little inferior. It's just a reputation. If it's a real battle, Chu Beihai is not necessarily inferior to them. Someone couldn't help retorting. You're right. Reputation is just a kind of strength, not everything. When the Great Era comes and the struggle for the Great Way begins, the strong and the weak can naturally be distinguished. The old man's expression had been very calm, and his words were also very casual. But when he said this, he suddenly shook his head and sighed. Unfortunately, the struggle for the Great Era is also a battle of life and death. Although there are many talents in the world, I'm afraid that most of them will only become paving stones for others. Then, his figure suddenly disappeared, as if he had evaporated into thin air. Paving stones. Lin Sun was shocked. A general success was built on the bones of tens of thousands of people, not to mention the competition between tens of thousands of talents. That scene was bound to be more tragic and stirring. Who was that old man? When Lin Sun went to look for him, there was no trace of him. It could be said that he came and went without a trace, unfathomable and mysterious. Moreover, when Lin Sun thought carefully, he was shocked to find that in his mind, he couldn't remember what the old man looked like. Was he a saint? Lin Sun couldn't calm down. How could there be such a person who was so close to the heavens in the small green flame city? No, the old man might just be passing by, and his purpose might be the boundary river that was undergoing a shocking change. Lin Sun made a judgment. The street was bustling and soon restored to its previous liveliness. Because the stone appraisal conference would start in the afternoon, Lin Sun found a restaurant at random, ordered some wine and dishes, and drank by himself. He knew very little about the Dongxing territory. He only knew that it was a place in the ancient desolation realm known as the home of saints and the eternal land of saints. Before he came here, Bai Lingshi had said that 70% of the top talents in the world came from the Dongxing territory, and the remaining 30% were occupied by the Shihing realm, the Nanxian realm, and the Northern Dipper realm. It could be imagined how prosperous and glorious the Dongxing territory was. And with the coming of the Great Era, the top talents of the young generation in the four realms would all gather in the Dongxing territory. Because if the Tianjiao Golden List, which had shocked the world since ancient times, appeared, it would definitely appear in the Dongxing territory. At that time, in order to compete for the Tianjiao Golden List, all the talents in the world would definitely set off an unprecedented competition. And Lu Kaiwei once said that in addition to those peerless talents who had been famous for a long time in the world, there were also peerless geniuses who were dormant in the sacred place. She even said that when the Great Era came, the road to the King Realm was destined to be paved with the blood and bones of talents. This was the battle of the Great Era. Ji Xingyao, Yu Linkong, Shunbai Xian, Luojia, Lu Kaiwei. I have seen so many peerless talents. I really don't know how many similar figures there are in the world. Besides, how can Xiao Hao of the Star Nether Imperial family and the little child in the sacred island of five elements and the ultimate be willing to be lonely when the Great Era comes? And how many ancient freaks like them who have been dormant for countless years just to wait for the coming of the Great Era? Lin Sun drank a cup of wine and couldn't help but sigh with emotion in his heart. There would never be a lack of talents in the world. The more he went forward, the more he understood that there would always be someone better than him. Of course, Lin Sun would not forget Yun Qingbai. If Ji Xingyao and Yu Linkong could be said to be influential figures of the younger generation, then Yun Qingbai could be considered a legend who had already stood tall before the current generation. Big news. I just got the news that Mo, she was killed. At this moment, someone shouted excitedly in the restaurant, causing an uproar. Mo, she was a king. How did he be killed? It said that it was a young man named Lin Sun who killed Mo Shi. Lin Sun? Why haven't I heard of him? This man is not a practitioner of our Dongxing boundary. He comes from the West Hung boundary and can be regarded as a peerless figure of the younger generation. He also has the nickname Demon Lin. Demon Lin? This name is really arrogant. I don't know whether Demon Lin can continue to show off his demonic power in the Dongxing boundary. There was a lot of discussion in the restaurant. Lin Sun's expression was a little strange. When he was in the West Hung boundary, anyone who talked about him would either praise him highly or gnash their teeth in hatred. But in the Dongxing boundary, the people who talked about him didn't take it seriously, and their words were full of ridicule and ridicule. No, a young man like him may be terrible among his peers, but how could he be a match for Mo Shi? Someone questioned. I heard that Mo, she was trapped and killed by Lin Sun with a King Wei forbidden formation. So that's how it is. I thought that this fiend celestial Lin was really that perverse. However, Lin Sun is quite capable to trap and kill a King Realm practitioner with a formation. Suddenly, the atmosphere in the restaurant became more and more relaxed. I heard that the Heaven's Pivot Holy Land has issued an order and mobilized some forces to seek justice for Mo Shi. They will search for and capture Lin Sun. When he heard this, Lin Sun was shocked. He didn't expect the Heaven's Pivot Holy Land to react so quickly. Umph. He's just a little kid from the Western Ocean world. He didn't kill old freak Mo because his cultivation was formidable, and it was instead because old freak she suffered an ambush and was trapped within the Grand Formation. Without this Grand Formation, he's nothing. Chapter 998. Near the window of the restaurant sat a young man dressed in black. He had fair skin and a feminine and aloof aura. This was obviously a descendant of an extraordinary family, and there was even a pair of young maidservants serving him meticulously in every possible way. He was the one who had said that killing Demon God Lin was as easy as killing a chicken. Friend, you're being too polite. No matter what, Demon God Lin killed old monster Mo, a king-level existence. He's definitely not simple, someone disagreed. The man in black sneered. That's because you don't know what it means to be powerful. Moreover, although old monster Mo, is a king-level expert, he's just a fake king-level expert. He's only been in the king level for a decade. He can only be considered the weakest king-level expert. It's not surprising that he was killed. He was very casual, and his words were full of arrogance. This made many people unhappy. The king level is the king level. Even the weakest king-level expert can't be judged by just anyone. Moreover, if Demon God Lin was here, would you still dare to say such words? The man in black leisurely drank a cup of wine and said indifferently, as far as I know, he's only at the reincarnation developing realm. Killing him is as easy as flipping one's hand. Not only would I dare to say such words, I would even dare to kill him with a slap. Lin Sun was not far away and could not help but glance at the man. The man's aura was feminine. Although he did not reveal any overbearing aura, he seemed extremely arrogant and conceited. This conceit was bound to be repulsive. Someone immediately said, "This Demon God Lin from the West Hung realm is only a young man, but he's already at the reincarnation developing realm. This is already quite shocking. May I ask what realm are you at, friend?" "I'm not talented. I reached the reincarnation developing realm at the age of 14. The man in black answered casually. Suddenly, everyone was shocked. They realized that the man in black was definitely a peerless figure. No wonder he dared to be so conceited. "May I ask for your name?" Someone could not help but ask. "Nangong Shui. Are you Nangong Shui from the heavens, pivot Holy Land?" "Ha! Is there a second me in this world?" The man in black smiled with a proud smile. "No wonder, it's Nangong Shui, one of the 6 direct disciples of the heavens pivot sacred land. There are very few people in the same generation as him in the ancient Azure province. The Nangong clan has 2 geniuses. The elder brother, Nangong Shui, and the younger brother, Nangong Hua, are both dazzling figures in the heavens pivot sacred ground." Everyone in the restaurant sighed and began to discuss Nangong Shui. They had clearly heard of him before. Lin Sun was stunned. He suddenly remembered that when he was in the Xiao Empire, the Heavens Pivot Holy Land had sent people to the mortal world and arrived at the Green Deer Academy. This Nangong Hua was one of them. At that time, a servant character by Nangong Hua's side had beaten the students of Green Deer Academy to the point that no one could fight against him. In the end, he had to make a move to suppress them one by one. Lin Sun clearly remembered that at that time. Nangong Hua was also extremely conceited, but he was kicked in the butt by Lin Sun and almost went crazy. In the end, the situation was resolved under the mediation of an old fellow at the King Realm called Yu Xiao. What Lin Sun did not expect was that he would actually meet Nangong Hua's brother here. Has he guessed my identity? That's why he showed such a disdainful attitude towards me? Lin Sun mused. In the afternoon, the treasure appraisal convention began as scheduled. The outskirts of the city suddenly became lively. From time to time, divine rainbows would fly out from the horizon and human figures would flicker. Most of them were young cultivators. They all surged towards that extremely large garden. Lin Sun had also come, but at this moment he was dressed in a black monk robe, holding prayer beads in his hand. His forehead was smooth and clean, and he had used the great non-phase technique to transform into the appearance of a young monk. If one of the 18 disciples of the Xitigarbha temple, Mu Zheng, was here, he would definitely vomit blood from anger. because Lin Sun had transformed into his appearance. Taking out the token that Gao Qianni had given him, Lin Sun smoothly entered the garden. As far as the eye could see, there were pavilions, ancient trees, and a large area covered by the garden. Young cultivators could be seen everywhere, and at the same time, there were many other cultivators coming in one after another. Swish! A golden divine light cut through the sky. It was a treasure ship. Tens of thousands of rays of auspicious light pressed down on the clouds and directly descended into the depths of the garden. The crowd immediately became noisy and looked over. It's the important figures and talents of the heavens' pivot holy land. What a group of powerful young people. The heavens' pivot holy land deserves to be the first orthodoxy in the ancient Song province. It's amazing that even the descendants cultivated by them are so powerful. While the discussion was going on, many people saw a golden figure rushing out. It was a young man in a golden robe. He was handsome and slender, and his whole body was bathed in golden light. His whole body was like a dazzling sun, and his blood and qi were amazing. He was like a god. Behind him, a group of young men and women crowded around him like stars surrounding the moon, which made the young man in the golden robe even more extraordinary. Chu Beihai. Some people didn't need to deliberately show off. A casual movement could make them look extraordinary. There was no doubt that Chu Beihai was such a person. He was dignified and outstanding, like a crane in a flock of chickens. His whole body was blazing with golden light, extraordinary and refined. At this moment, many young women showed a look of infatuation and fanaticism, and those male practitioners also showed a look of admiration and admiration. As soon as a person showed up, his style dominated the whole audience. Even Lin Sun had to admit that Chu Beihai deserved to be a peerless figure. His style was so outstanding that it was hard not to notice him. Of course, Lin Sun had seen many people like this. At least Shun Baixian, Yu Lingkong, and even Mu Zheng, who he was disguised as at the moment, were inferior to this person. Lin Sun didn't care much about it. What really surprised him was that he saw an acquaintance among the young men and women behind Chu Beihai. It was a handsome young man in a white robe. It was Gu Yunting. When he was in Green Deer School, Gu Yunting was second to none. He had the talent of golden body of Tao fire and was highly respected by many of his peers. However, Lin Sun and he had a conflict. Although they didn't really fight, their relationship became very bad. Now, after a few years, they met again in the Dongxing territory, which surprised Lin Sun. In fact, when he thought about it carefully, among the young disciples who went to the ancient desolation from Xiao Empire by Ling Shi, Shai Yutong, and Gu Yunting, they all entered an ancient orthodoxy to cultivate. On the contrary, Lin Sun seemed to be doing the worst. Until now, he was still alone, wandering alone. Of course, this was only the difference in whether he had a master or not. Gu Yunting was obviously doing well now. He followed behind Chu Beihai. Although his sharpness was overshadowed by Chu Beihai, it could be seen that his status in the heavens' pivot holy land was not low. It was just that compared to Chu Beihai, he was slightly inferior. Then, Lin Sun noticed another acquaintance. He wore a fiery red jade robe, a tall hat, and a wide belt. His face was handsome and cold. It was Nangong Hua, who had been kicked in the butt by him. Lin Sun quickly withdrew his gaze. He knew that all the outstanding students in Green Deer School would be sent to the heavens' pivot holy land to cultivate. So, it wasn't strange to meet a few familiar faces. "Monk, don't block the way." A feminine reprimand sounded in his ears. At first, Lin Sun didn't react, but then he realized that it was an order. Turning his head, Lin Sun saw Nangong Shui, who had threatened to kill him like killing a chicken. This feminine man had his hands behind his back. He was still very arrogant and conceited. He brought along 2 maids and was staring at Lin Sun coldly. "So it's Taoist Nangong?" Lin Sun smiled. Nangong Shui was startled and frowned. "Who are you?" "I'm Mu Zheng." Lin Sun put his palms together and looked solemn. He imitated Mu Zheng's dignified and calm demeanor. "Do I know you?" Nangong Shui was surprised. "It's enough that I know you," Lin Sun said with a smile. Although his cultivation had become more and more profound, His character of seeking revenge for the smallest grievance had not changed much. Nan Gongshui had threatened to kill him with a slap. If Lin Sun didn't hear it, it would have been fine. However, Lin Sun had heard it. This was no different from provoking him. Why do you say that? Nan Gongshui felt that the monk in front of him was very strange. Because if there's a chance, you might ask me for help, Lin Sun said seriously. What help? Monk, don't play tricks with me. Nan Gongshui snorted coldly. Buddha said that I can't say it. It's not the right time, so I can't force it. Lin Sun said slowly and turned to leave. This bald donkey has learned to fool people at such a young age. In my opinion, there's no good thing among the Buddhists. Nan Gongshui sneered. He felt that Lin Sun's words were very strange. As he spoke, he left with the two maids. After strolling around the garden for a while, Lin Sun came to the stone appraisal area. On the green grass, there were all kinds of strange meteorites. Some were big, some were small, and all of them were filled with silver starlight. This was the outer area of the stone appraisal convention. The quality of the meteorites on display could only be considered average. The deeper one went, the better the quality of the meteorites. For example, the meteorite that attracted Chu Beihai was located in the deepest part of the garden. It was not a place that anyone could casually enter. Lin Sun came here purely to try his luck. After all, the token given to him by Gao Tianyi was equivalent to 40,000 top-grade spiritual marrows. It would be too wasteful if he didn't spend it. He stood there and carefully examined it with his divine awareness. When he dug up the 3 king herbs at the bottom of the random stars beach, he got them purely by chance. It was mostly luck, but now it was different. Every piece of meteorite was on display, marked with different prices for people to select and identify. If there was no treasure in the selected meteorite, it would be a waste of money. This was what was known as gambling on stones in the common sense. Lin Sun had no experience in stone gambling, so he planned to test the waters in the outer area first. He wanted to see how he should choose the meteorites and whether he could get something good. Interesting. Soon, Lin Sun noticed that there was a kind of obscure power surging inside each piece of Starmane's meteorite, which could block the probing of the divine awareness, making it impossible to perceive what was hidden inside. It was also impossible to judge whether it was a useless stone or not. Chapter 999. Under the operation of the eyes of the mocking wind, Lin Sun's eyes seemed to be able to see through all illusions and see through the essence of things. The star remains and meteorites were originally shrouded by an obscure power. Looking at them was like looking at flowers in a fog, like scratching an itch through one's boots. But now everything had changed. In an instant, Lin Sun saw a fiery red stone seed sealed in a watermelon-sized meteorite. It was only the size of a quail egg, red like fire and crystal clear. Fire source crystal. It was a precious spiritual material that could be used in medicine or forging weapons. But it was not rare. Lin Sun remembered that this treasure was sold in the Tianyi Tower. It was worth at most 800 mid-grade spiritual marrow. But now, this star remnant meteorite with the fire source crystal sealed inside was marked with a price of 500 high-grade spiritual essence, which was equivalent to 50,000 mid-grade spiritual essence. The price difference was more than 6 times. Whoever chose and bought this meteorite would definitely suffer a loss. It turns out that the eyes of mocking wind has such a wonderful effect. Lin Sun was excited. Doesn't this mean that I can definitely make a profit when I choose the meteorite? Hey, monk, you are here. Do you also want to gamble on stones? At this moment, Lin Sun suddenly heard Nan Gongshui's feminine voice with a hint of mockery. Turning around, he saw Nan Gongshui leisurely walking towards him from afar. Beside him, there were many young men and women, all dressed in gorgeous clothes. Obviously, they were not ordinary practitioners. I'm just looking around, Lin Sun said casually. Monk, tell me honestly, what do you mean by what you just said? Nan Gongshui's eyes were like lightning as he looked at Lin Sun. Why do I feel like you are cursing me? Lin Sun was surprised that this guy's intuition was really sharp, but his face was solemn as he said, the time is not right. I can't say it. Monk, which temple did you come from? How can you speak like that? A young man standing behind Nangong Shui scolded. Lin Sun squinted at the man and said, "Benefactor, I see that your eyebrows are full of evil and your glabella is dark. The land of the heavenly court is shrouded in bad luck. This is a bad omen. You'd better be careful with your words and actions. Otherwise, I'm afraid there will be a disaster." The man was stunned for a moment before he flew into a rage. "How dare you curse me?" Boom! With that, he punched at Lin Sun's face. What was domineering? This was it, fighting over the slightest disagreement. Lin Sun put his palms together and sighed softly, like a Buddha standing in a pure land, with a kind of compassion for the state of the universe. As a matter of fact, he had already secretly circulated a unique skill in the Great Earth Scripture, the Skunda demon subduing momentum technique, causing an invisible force field to appear around his body. It had the ability to subdue demons, and it was impossible to break through all techniques. Bang! Before the young man's fist touched Lin Sun's face, Lin Sun felt like hitting a diamond. It was not only extremely hard, but also produced a strong and fierce recoil force, which broke his fist and wrist instantly. Crack! After that, his entire right arm was broken, and his figure staggered back. It hurt to the point he gasped and grimaced in pain, and he almost let out a shrill cry. The pupils of Nangong Shui and the others shrank. They suddenly felt that this young monk was very strange and not simple. Lin Sun sighed. "Benefactor, look, what I said before has come true. Isn't this a disaster?" Everyone almost rolled their eyes. This was obviously an injury caused by a fight. How could it be a disaster? This monk was too good at talking nonsense. However, no one dared to underestimate him. Lin Sun had stood still just now, and there was no change in his momentum, but the young man suffered a recoil. This was not something an ordinary person could do. "So you're a powerful Buddhist practitioner." A cold light surged in Nangong Shui's eyes like the rising and falling tides, incomparably frightening. "Taoism, Pir Nangong, you flatter me. If there is nothing else, I will continue to appraise stones." Lin Sun smiled and turned around, too lazy to pay attention to the young man. This was the place where the Treasure Inspection Convention was held. There were many people and cultivators here. Although Lin Sun was not afraid, he did not want to cause trouble at this time. The reason why he changed his appearance was to not be recognized and avoid unnecessary trouble. Wait! However, Nangong Shui did not give up. He stepped forward and said, "Since you like to appraise stones, why don't I play with you?" "Play?" Lin Sun asked. "Yes, it is a bet." Nangong Shui's eyes were aggressive. "You and I will each choose a star remnant meteorite of the same price and compare the value of the treasure we cut out. The higher the value of the treasure, the more the other party will pay the corresponding amount of spiritual essence. How about it?" He was very conceited and arrogant. He was quite experienced in appraising star remnant meteorites. Moreover, he had mastered a secret method, so he was very confident that he could cut out a treasure. Looking at Nangong Shui, who was full of confidence, Lin Sun had a strange feeling in his heart. He muttered in his heart, "This guy is asking for a beating." If it was before, Lin Sun might have hesitated, but after discovering the magical effect of the wind-mocking eyes, he was not afraid of gambling with anyone at all. At this time, in his eyes, Nangong Shui was like a fat sheep coming to his door. If he did not make a killing, it would be a waste of his sincerity. However, although Lin Sun thought so in his heart, he sighed and said, "Forget it. I am a monk. Buddha said, diligently cultivate the precepts and wisdom, extinguish greed, anger, and delusion. If I gamble with you, I will have greed and anger." Nangong Shui was immediately annoyed. This monk was simply too stubborn. He was too unhappy. "Monk, are you afraid? If so, you should take the initiative to admit defeat and apologize to Brother Nangong. Then we will not bother to argue with you anymore." Some people said contemptuously, "Oh, you are really deceiving yourself. If you are not greedy, how can you come to the Treasure Inspection Convention? You bald donkeys are really hypocritical." Some people sneered, "Monk, are you still a man? If you're a man, be quick. If you're not even as good as a woman, why are you still cultivating Buddhism?" A shrewish girl in a red dress shouted. Lin Sun sighed helplessly and said, "Well, Buddha said, to enlighten others is to enlighten oneself. Today, I will enlighten fellow practitioner Nangong." As soon as Lin Sun said this, everyone sneered. Enlighten Nangong Shui? This monk was really arrogant. Nangong Shui's forehead was full of black lines. Why did these words sound wrong? It sounded like he was a demon and needed to be enlightened. Let me make it clear first. I only have 40,000 top-grade spiritual essence. If I lose it all, I will never gamble again. Lin Sun frowned and looked like he was lacking confidence. 40,000 top-grade spiritual essence? The eyes of those who came with Nangong Shui suddenly lit up. They didn't expect that this monk, who seemed to be so weak, had such an amazing wealth. 40,000 high-grade spiritual essence stones was something that even the disciples of great sects rarely possessed. Nangong Shui was also startled. He didn't expect that he would accidentally catch a fat sheep, and a monk at that. When the K did monks become so rich? All of a sudden, Lin Sun seemed to have turned into a huge walking spiritual essence. He was shining and full of temptation. "Monk, how about we also participate in the bet?" Someone couldn't help but ask. "This?" Lin Sun looked embarrassed. "I only have this much spiritual essence. I'm afraid I can't afford to lose." "It's okay. Maybe you'll be lucky and win." A young man tempted. The others also egged him on. In the end, Lin Sun sighed and nodded. "Buddha is merciful. Since you are so sincere, how can I refuse?" This fat sheep took the bait. These men and women were very excited. They couldn't wait to slaughter Lin Sun. At the same time, Lin Sun smiled brightly in his heart. He didn't expect that not only would he be able to slaughter Nangong Shui, but there would also be a group of fat sheep waiting to be slaughtered. He couldn't help but wonder if all Buddhists were blessed with luck. Their movements had already attracted the attention of many practitioners. When they learned that Nangong Shui and a Buddhist cultivator were going to make a bet, they became excited and gathered around to watch the fun. "Okay, stop talking nonsense. Let's start with the 500 top-grade spiritual essence meteorite. How about it?" Nangong Shui couldn't wait any longer. "Okay." Lin Sun frowned, showing a helpless and compromising posture. This made the onlookers sigh with emotion. This Buddhist cultivator was really merciful. He obviously lacked confidence, but he still wanted to bet. Wasn't this the same as sending himself to be slaughtered? If it weren't for Nangong Shui's power, they would have joined in and slaughtered the monk. This one, Nangong Shui had already chosen a meteorite. He made a decision without hesitation. This one. At the same time, a playful smile appeared on his face. He looked at Lin Sun and said, "Monk, it's your turn." Lin Sun stood there with a serious look on his face, but he couldn't make a decision for a long time. He looked hesitant. This made everyone more certain that this monk was destined to be slaughtered. He was obviously a novice. After so long, he still hadn't chosen a meteorite. "Monk, hurry up." Someone was getting impatient from waiting and started to urge him. "Monk, can you do it or not? Why don't I help you choose a meteorite?" Someone jeered, full of ridicule. The monk is so anxious that he's sweating." Someone noticed that a layer of sweat had appeared on Lin Sun's forehead and couldn't help but laugh. Nangong Shui and the others were very confident. Today, this fat sheep was destined to be unable to run away. This one, Lin Sun gritted his teeth and chose a meteorite. He pretended to sigh with a worried expression. When they saw the meteorite he chose, many people couldn't help but have a strange look on their faces. That piece of star remains meteor seemed to be dazzling and extraordinary, but in the eyes of a connoisseur, it was a piece of inferior quality. The surface of the meteorite was broken and there were many small holes. Not to mention valuable treasures, it was very likely that there wouldn't be any treasures. This monk was really unlucky. For a moment, they couldn't help but look at Lin Sun with pity. They were afraid that he wouldn't be able to escape from this slaughter. Chapter 1000. Waiter, you can cut the stone now. Seeing that Lin Sun chose the meteorite, Nangong Shui spoke directly as if he was afraid that Lin Sun would regret. "Okay, A middle-aged man stepped forward with a cyan wooden saber in his hand. This was the spirit-cutting saber, which was made of a kind of precious Bikuan wood. When cutting the stone, it would not destroy the treasure inside. The middle-aged man, Jia Zheng, was a senior stonecutter. He stepped forward and carefully looked at the meteorite before he picked up the saber to cut it. Crack, crack, the stone was slowly cut off, and the stone chips were flying everywhere. Jia Zheng's stone-cutting skill was exquisite and skillful, as smooth as flowing water, like a butcher dismembering an ox. There was a kind of beauty that was close to Tao. Everyone couldn't help but cheer in their hearts. As the saying goes, every profession has its own specialization. Even though Jia Zheng was only a stonecutter, he undoubtedly had attainments that were worthy of admiration in this field. Soon, the meteorite selected by Nangong Shui was cut open, revealing a fist-sized piece of pink chalcedony, overflowing with wisps of dreamy luster. Rainbow chalcedony. There was a stir in the field, and many people were amazed. This was a very precious treasure, an ingredient for refining king-level elixirs. A piece as big as a fist was worth more than 1,000 pieces of top-grade spiritual marrow. Congratulations, child. You've cut the rainbow chalcedony. Judging from its appearance, it should be worth about 1,300 pieces of top-grade spiritual marrow, Jia Zheng said. Brother Nangong's insight is like a torch. It's an eye-opener for us. That's what an expert is. Today, Brother Nangong is just a little test. Who would know that Brother Nangong is so proficient in stone appraisal? Those young men and women were very excited and flattered Nangong Shui. The most important thing was that as long as Lin Sun lost, he would have to pay them 1,300 pieces of top-grade spiritual marrow, according to the gambling agreement. This was what made them happy. This was called slaughtering a fat sheep. It didn't take much effort at all, and there were a lot of benefits to be gained. Nangong Shui was also very complacent in his heart, but on the surface, he said indifferently, "You flatter me. It's just a little trick. It's not worth mentioning. Monk, it's your turn." Someone couldn't wait to make a fool of Lin Sun. All of a sudden, many people looked at Lin Sun with a gloating expression, because it had been seen that the meteorite chosen by Lin Sun was destined to be a piece of waste. It was impossible to cut out a good treasure from it. Lin Sun gritted his teeth and said, "Gentlemen, if I win this time, you can't go back on your words. It's not too late for you to withdraw from the bet." No matter how one listened to these words, there was a hint of lack of confidence in them. The young men and women felt more and more carefree. They all promised that they would not go back on their word. Lin Sun still didn't believe it. He said to the onlookers, "Please bear witness. If I win," before he could finish his sentence, he was interrupted. "Monk, why are you so long-winded? This is the treasure appraisal convention, and everyone here is a reputable figure. If you really win, who would dare to go back on their word? Well, let's begin." Lin Sun heaved a long sigh, looking resigned to his fate. Jia Zheng, the stone-cutter, hesitated for a moment and then sighed. "Monk, you don't need to cut this stone. It's a honeycomb way stone with a variety of textures and dense cavities. You lost the bet this time." The crowd burst into laughter. Even the stone-cutter said so. It was too much of a blow to the monk. "Monk, it's your first time to gamble on stones. It's inevitable that you will make mistakes. Just take it as a lesson." Someone joked, Come, let me calculate for you. Including Brother Nangong's bet, we have a total of 9 people. In total, you have to pay us 11,700 high-grade spirit essences." One of the young men couldn't help but ask for the bet. "Well, it's the first time for this monk. We can't let others think that we bully him. Let's just take 10,000 pieces of top-grade spiritual marrow." Nangong Shui waved his hand generously and said leisurely. Even so, it still caused many people to suck in a cold breath. A single bet would cost him more than 10,000 pieces of high-grade spiritual marrow. This cut was really ruthless. To everyone's surprise, Lin Sun seemed to be unable to bear this kind of failure. He said, "I don't believe it. If you don't cut it, I'll cut it." As he spoke, he took the stone cutter from Jia Zheng's hand and cut it down as if he was venting his anger. Just this action alone made everyone realize that the monk was flustered and exasperated. Cutting a rock was a very particular skill. Even if there was a treasure, he was afraid that it would be seriously damaged by this slash of his saber. Crack! The meteorite was cracked open. There was nothing inside but the broken pieces piled up on the ground. The crowd almost laughed out loud. It was really a piece of waste. "Monk, you still don't want to give up?" A young man ridiculed. Lin Sun's eyes lit up and he shouted, "I'm going to win." The crowd was stunned. They saw Lin Sun bend down and pick up a gray stone bead from the pile of debris. It was only the size of a pigeon's egg, extremely inconspicuous. What was this? All eyes were fixed on it. Lin Sun had already begun to dissect this inconspicuous small stone bead with the stone cutter. Soon, a ray of bright purple light was reflected, which was magnificent and dazzling. It dyed Lin Sun's palm with a layer of shimmering purple light, holy and clear. "Oh my God, the monk really picked up a treasure. There's a stone hidden in a stone. Look at this scene. This treasure is not simple." The whole audience was in a great uproar. Many cultivators cried out in surprise. Even Jia Zheng, the stonecutter, was a little stunned. He said to himself, "It's impossible for a treasure to appear in that meteorite." How? Under their eyes, a purple crystal the size of a melon seed appeared. It was extremely small, but it bloomed with a dense purple luster, which made people feel dazzled. What was this? Many people were surprised. Just by looking at the scene, they knew that this thing was very magical. It was much better than the rainbow chalcedony that Nangong Shui had cut out before. How is this possible? How could a piece of trash turn out to be a treasure? Nangong Shui was speechless, and his face was gloomy. The Buddha showed up and gave me a chance. He wants to use my hand to bring you back to the shore. Lin Sun smiled. However, his words and his smile always made people feel that he deserved a beating. This is really King weird. The expressions of those young men and women were also very interesting. They were stunned, and their hearts seemed to be galloping by 10,000 wild horses. "Everyone, don't be so stubborn. You may be pecked in the eye by the wild goose all year round. Just take it as a lesson." Lin Sun looked solemn, but his words made Nangong Shui and others feel disgusted, because this was exactly what they had said just now. But now Lin Sun returned the favor. "Monk, the value of this thing hasn't been identified yet. Do you think you have one?" Someone was not reconciled. Suddenly, Nangong Shui and others all had hope in their hearts. Yes, they didn't even know the origin of this thing, and its value hadn't been determined yet. The winner hadn't been decided yet. "Everyone, are you going to go back on your word?" Monks don't lie. Any cultivator with a little insight can see that my treasure is much more precious than yours. Lin Sun frowned and said, "Don't talk nonsense. It's just a little brighter. Its value hasn't been determined yet." Those young men and women retorted, "You are all reputable figures. Can't you afford to lose?" Lin Sun sighed. Everyone gnashed their teeth in hatred. This monk was still worried about his gains and losses before, but now he suddenly became arrogant after getting lucky. It was really disgusting. "No matter what, we have to determine the value of this thing first." Nangong Shui took a breath and said in a deep voice, "If we really lose, we are willing to accept the loss." Swish! As soon as his voice fell, the figure of an old man suddenly appeared in the field. He was wearing an old Taoist robe, which seemed to have been worn for a long time. Top purple essence. It's really... The old Taoist's skin was bronze, his beard and hair were gray, and his body was dry, but he was full of spirit. At this moment, he stared at the purple stone in Lin Sun's hand with a pair of pale golden eyes. He seemed to be very excited, and his dry body released an invisible pressure. In an instant, everyone felt that this old Taoist was not like a person, but a colossus that could hold up the universe. He was like an ancient, fierce god that hadn't appeared in the world for thousands of years, making the surrounding cultivators feel a suffocating sense of oppression. Many people even collapsed to the ground. Lin Sun also gasped. The aura of this old Taoist was more powerful and terrifying than any King Realm cultivator he had ever seen. It made him feel a creepy sense of oppression. Unfortunately, it's too small. It's far from enough. The old Taoist suddenly sighed softly, and the invisible power around him faded like a tide and returned to normal. Everyone was relieved, but when they looked at the old Taoist, they still felt a lingering fear. There was no doubt that this was an old monster. "If Senior likes it, feel free to take it," Lin Sun said. The old Taoist waved his sleeve and threw a storage bag to Lin Sun. "I won't take advantage of you. This is 5,000 high-grade spiritual marrow, enough to buy this small piece of top purple essence." Then he took the purple stone in Lin Sun's hand and suddenly disappeared into the distance. At that moment, everyone seemed to see a real dragon flying across the sky, making the universe tremble. In the depths of the garden, many experts were alarmed and looked over. Not long after, the identity of the old Taoist was spread: Red Dragon King, one of the 8 monster kings in the floating sea. The floating sea was a dangerous sea that made people pale at the mention of it. The monster race was entrenched in it, and there were 8 monster kings guarding it. Red Dragon King was one of the 8 monster kings. His original form was a blood centipede, and he had become famous thousands of years ago. He was a terrifying old monster that had set foot on the path of immortality, and his power was monstrous. But no one expected that this Red Dragon King would appear at the Stone Appraisal Conference and buy a piece of top purple essence. After the shock, everyone looked at Lin Sun with a complicated gaze. This monk was simply a lucky bastard. Just by chance, he cut out a piece of Dao marrow that even a terrifying existence like Red Dragon King couldn't resist. It was too King unreasonable. Chapter 1001. The whole place was silent. The cultivators who were watching all sighed in their hearts. This monk's luck was simply heaven-defying. The Red Dragon King had just bought the treasure with 5,000 upper-grade spiritual marrow. If Nangong Shui and the others wanted to pay, it would be 45,000 upper-grade spiritual marrow. This price was more than enough to buy a King Path extreme weapon. What Lin Sun paid was only 500 pieces of top-grade spiritual marrow. Big profit. The spectators should not be sighing with emotion. As for Nangong Shui and the others, they were so depressed that they wanted to cough up blood. They had thought that they had caught a fat sheep and could not wait to slaughter it. Who would have thought that the tables would turn and they would be the ones who would lose a piece of their flesh? Lin Sun said with an ashamed expression, "Alas, I'm too sorry. How about this? You only need to pay 40,000 upper-grade spiritual marrow as a token of my appreciation. Don't worry, we will give you everything we lose." Nangong Shui's face was gloomy. How could a monk be pitiful? He could not afford to lose face like this. Immediately, they each took out a corresponding amount of upper-grade spiritual marrow and gave it to Lin Sun. Lin Sun could not help but sigh in his heart. The wind-mocking eyes was truly a unique and miraculous technique. It had easily helped him earn more than 40,000 upper-grade spiritual marrow. "Monk, let's continue gambling." Nangong Shui swore inwardly. After suffering such a big loss, how could he let it go? Still gambling? Lin Sun seemed very unwilling. "What? You want to leave after winning the spiritual marrow? How can there be such a cheap thing in this world? Not only will we gamble today, we will also gamble until the end. Let's see who loses everything first." Nangong Shui's expression was cold and arrogant. In his opinion, Lin Sun was just a blind cat running into a dead mouse. But this kind of luck would not appear again and again. In the end, stone gambling was still about one's ability and cultivation. In this aspect, Nangong Shui was very confident that he could win against Lin Sun. "You guys also?" Lin Sun looked at the youths. "Don't worry. As long as you're not afraid, we will definitely accompany you to the end." The youths gritted their teeth. They were very unwilling to suffer such a big loss. Originally, they wanted to slaughter a fat sheep, but instead, they were slaughtered by a fat sheep. If this got out, it would be very embarrassing. The surrounding crowd couldn't help but laugh. They realized that if the monk didn't spit out what he had eaten today, he definitely wouldn't let the matter rest. "Buddha bless us." Lin Sun chanted the name of Amitabha with a resolute look. Well, since you are so stubborn, I can only sacrifice myself to save others and act as your super guide. He had almost blurted it out as expiation. Of course, no one cared about this little detail. Everyone was eager for Lin Sun to agree and continue to watch the fun. The second round of betting began. This time, Nangong Shui was very cautious. He carefully selected a star remnant meteorite that was the size of a millstone. Lin Sun, on the other hand, began to struggle again. He sighed with emotion in his heart. Life was like a drama, and it all depended on acting skills. Killing fat sheep was also a skill. In the end, under the impatient urging of the crowd, Lin Sun chose a normal star remnant meteorite. Lin Sun consciously lost the bet, but the difference in the treasures he cut out was not large. He only paid 6,000 upper-grade spiritual essence to the opponent. Even so, Nangong Shui and the others became excited. They were even more certain that the monk had run into some dogshit luck. He was definitely a newbie when it came to stone appraisal. You still want to bet? Lin Sun frowned. Since we're betting, we'll bet to the end. Monk, you can't be a coward. The youths all shouted. Lin Sun sighed and reluctantly accepted the third round of betting. In the end, he lost again. However, the amount of spiritual essence he lost was still not much, only 7,000 pieces. Nangong Shui and the others smiled brightly and were full of confidence. They believed that if this continued, sooner or later, the monk would be completely defeated. Lin Sun had a depressed look on his face as he sighed again and again. In reality, he didn't feel anything at all. He only lost because he threw out the bait. He didn't want to win too much and scare away the fat sheep. Then, Lin Sun lost in the fourth, the fifth, and the sixth rounds of gambling. The more than 40,000 pieces of spiritual essence that he had won were also returned to their rightful owners. Even the onlookers couldn't bear to see this kind of situation where the monk was bound to lose. It was too miserable. If the monk continued to lose like this, he would definitely lose his underwear. At this time, Lin Sun's forehead was covered with sweat and his face was gloomy and ugly. He was trying his best to hold on. But Nangong Shui and the others had already won and were happy. How could they give up? They immediately asked to continue betting. Lin Sun said angrily, "Everyone, are you trying to kill me? Since it's like this, why don't we make a bet to determine the winner?" Saying this, he took out a storage bag and said, "There are 40,000 pieces of upper-grade spiritual essence in here. If I lose, they will all belong to you. If you lose, each of you will pay the same amount of spiritual essence. How about it?" He had already investigated and found that with the many meteorites in this area, it was impossible for him to win all of them in a single bet. That was why he had set up a trap and put forward the suggestion. "Ridiculous. If you lose, you will only pay 40,000 pieces of spiritual essence. If we lose, we will have to pay 40,000 pieces of spiritual essence. How can there be such a cheap thing in the world?" Someone was not happy. "Fine, in that case, I will also put this thing as a pledge. If I lose, it will belong to you." Lin Sun gritted his teeth and took out a fiery red spiritual herb. As soon as it appeared, a refreshing fragrance filled the air. It seemed to be able to penetrate into the depths of the soul. Many practitioners were fascinated by it. King herb, and it was an incomparably magical king herb. All the practitioners present felt thirsty and their eyes were burning. They had never thought that this monk could have such a rare treasure. Unfortunately, when they wanted to take a closer look, Lin Sun had already put it away. This time, in order to make a killing, he was ready to go all out. Nangong Shui and the others were tempted. A rare treasure like a king-grade medicine could be measured in terms of value, but it was definitely priceless. It was impossible to buy because no one was willing to sell it. If they could win a king herb in this bet, it would definitely be a great harvest. "Monk, are you sure?" Nangong Shui asked. "Brother Nangong, this guy is bluffing in order to scare us away. Only then will he have the opportunity to escape. We absolutely cannot let him do as he wishes." Those youngsters started to clamor. Their eyes were red, and they were drooling over Lin Sun's king medicine. Moreover, through the previous bet, They had formed a kind of awareness that this monk did not know what stone appraisal was. Under such circumstances, they were naturally full of confidence. The other practitioners were also envious. They wanted to participate, but because of Nangong Shui's power, they could only think about it. Afraid? This monk has never cared about worldly possessions. How can I be afraid? Lin Sun snorted. Fine, then let's bet again. 1 round to determine the winner. Nangong Shui gritted his teeth and made a decision. What about you? Lin Sun looked at the young people. Nonsense, of course we will bet. They answered without hesitation. This gamble had not yet begun, but many practitioners from the nearby areas had already been attracted over. For a moment, this place became the most lively place in the treasure appraisal conference. Especially when they heard that Lin Sun wanted to bet on a king medicine. The uproar and discussion were even more incessant and sensational. Let's begin. Nangong Shui began to act. He showed unprecedented caution and seriousness. He wanted to win beautifully so that people wouldn't say that he had cheated a king herb. Lin Sun watched quietly. At this moment, he did not want to be too eye-catching. He only needed to win a little. Everyone became nervous. There were also experts who were proficient in stone appraisal observing, but no one reminded them. This was the rule. When they saw Nangong Shui pick out a meteorite that was shaped like a winter melon, they could not help but secretly nod. There were over 100 pieces of star remnant meteorites scattered in this area. However, in the eyes of experts, the one Nangong Shui had chosen was undoubtedly the one with the best appearance. That monk was finished, because the other meteorites could not be compared with the one Nangong Shui chose. For a moment, the way they looked at Lin Sun became playful. They sighed in their hearts. What a pity for a king herb. At the same time, Lin Sun was also startled. Under the observation of the wind-mocking eyes, he naturally saw through the mystery. However, he didn't expect that Nangong Shui would be able to accurately pick out the best star remnant meteorite. Inside the stone, there was a soul aura surging. Sealed within was an entirely pitch-black chrysalis. It was extremely extraordinary. If Lin Sun's guess was right, this should be a demonic cracked butterfly. In ancient times, there was a demonic cracked butterfly that had stepped into the saint realm. With a gentle flap of its wings, it could cut off a part of the sky. Its power was terrifying. However, if the demonic cracked butterfly in this meteorite could not turn into a butterfly, it would only be a bug. Monk, it's your turn. Nangong Shui returned confidently. Lin Sun stepped forward and pretended to hesitate for a long time. Finally, he chose a piece of meteorite and returned without saying a word. Seeing this, the experts revealed looks of disappointment. They could already see that the meteorite Lin Sun had chosen was destined to not have any treasures. The outcome was already decided. Nangong Shui also noticed the details of the meteorite Lin Sun had chosen. He could not help but reveal a conceited smile and said to Jia Zheng, "Start cutting the meteorite. In order to convince fellow Mu Zheng of his defeat, we can start with his meteorite." That's not necessarily true, Lin Sun retorted, but many people felt pity for him. They thought that his struggle was futile. Soon, Lin Sun's meteorite was cut open. Inside was a spirit pot grass. It was shaped like a pot and contained a universe within it. It was an excellent spiritual herb for refining spiritual energy. It could be considered precious, but its value was only around 700 upper-grade spiritual essence. The young people laughed. Amazing monk, you actually got a good treasure this time. Chapter 1002. Lin Sun sighed and said, "It seems that I'm really going to lose. However, I'm not willing to give up. Please let me observe the meteorite selected by fellow practitioner Nangong and see what kind of amazing treasure can be cut out of it." "Huh, this is called not turning back until you hit the wall." The youth sneered. I said, "I'll make sure you lose convincingly this time." Nangong Shuelio's face was filled with endless confidence. Very soon, the stone cutter, Jia Zheng, began to move. The atmosphere in the area became silent as everyone's gaze was fixed on him. They were all curious about what kind of treasure Nangong Shuelu would get from this meteorite. Even Lin Sun was paying attention to this meteorite. However, no one noticed that Lin Sun was looking at this meteorite with a trace of undetectable strangeness. Stone fragments flew in the air. Jiazheng appeared extremely serious and cautious. His movements were also extremely careful. He could also see that this meteorite was not ordinary. Dong! Dong! Before the meteorite was completely cut open, a strange and rhythmic sound came from it. It was like a powerful heartbeat. At first, it was very soft, but it gradually became louder and louder. The dense sound represented an extremely abundant life force. Many cultivators sucked in a breath of cold air as their eyes lit up. Could it be that there was a strange creature inside this meteorite? Many people's mouths were dry. In the past, there had been people who had found unique creatures from meteorites. For example, 2,000 years ago, a monk from the depths of the western desert had found a fire dragonfish. This was a strange creature that was regarded as a divine fish by ancient sages. It was a natural auspicious sign. 8,000 years ago, a young man called Yi Zhiqiu had found a sword spirit by chance. The sword spirit transformed into a young woman who could control the peerless swordway. This made the young man kneel 3 times and kowtow 9 times, acknowledging the sword spirit as his master. Now, Yi Zhiqiu had become a famous sword saint in the ancient Desolation region. He was in charge of the heart-controlling sword pavilion at the peak of the Great Snow Mountain in the Dongsheng realm. He was known as the heart-controlling sword saint. There were many rumors like this. But now, the star remnant meteorite Nangong Shui had chosen was releasing an astonishing rhythm of life. This naturally shocked everyone. Even Nangong Shui's eyes were burning with passion. He could tell that this stone was extraordinary, but he didn't expect it to be this extraordinary. More and more cultivators started spectating from the surroundings. All of them held their breaths in concentration while their gazes descended onto the meteor in succession, and they felt anticipation in their hearts. Many Xiozhi couldn't help but become nervous. The stone cutter felt an unprecedented pressure, and his movements became even more careful, lest he accidentally hurt the living being inside the stone. Only Lin Sun was calm. He already knew the result. Crack! When the meteor was completely split open, an expanse of black divine radiance suddenly shot out, and it caused space to be dyed in the ethereal color of eternal night. Heavens! There really is a strange creature inside. It's a chrysalis. The silent atmosphere was broken, and cries of surprise rose from all directions. All the cultivators could see the black light flowing and the chi of the Tao rising within the cut, open meteorite. A black cocoon the size of a thumb was lying quietly within it. The aura of life that surged like a drum was being released from the cocoon. Everyone was in a trance, as if the creature inside the cocoon was the king from the depths of the devil abyss, and it had a kind of frightening power. Nangong Shui was so overjoyed that he almost cried out. This time, he had planned to ruthlessly take advantage of Lin Sun and win the king herb. Who would have thought that by chance he would also find a chrysalis that was breeding a strange life? This harvest could be said to be heaven-defying. The other Xiozhi also had complicated expressions, and their hearts were filled with envy and jealousy. In terms of value, this chrysalis was absolutely priceless. Nangong Shui had made a fortune. At the same time, they looked at Lin Sun with deep pity in their eyes. This monk's luck was simply too bad. Monk, do you want to give up now? Nangong Shui was so excited that his voice had changed. It was filled with a touch of excitement, complacency, and high-spirited. However, before he could finish his words, his voice stopped abruptly, and his face changed dramatically. On the black cocoon, the black divine light suddenly dissipated, and the chi of the way disappeared. The strong rhythm of life that was originally like the beating of a drum also abruptly weakened. All of a sudden, Nangong Shui felt as if he had been struck by lightning. He seemed to have lost his soul and almost went crazy. He rushed forward, took out the black chrysalis with trembling hands, and examined it carefully. However, he found that the chrysalis had turned into a hard stone. It was cold and lifeless, and there was no fluctuation of life. It was as if it had lost its life, and only a cold corpse was left. The other Shioja also noticed this scene, and they were all dumbfounded. How could this be? This change was so sudden that it caught everyone off guard. It should have been a great opportunity that would make everyone envious. Who would have thought that in the blink of an eye, the situation would be reversed? A dead strange creature was worthless. The scene was deathly silent. They were all stunned by this sudden turn of events. Only Lin Sun sighed. Alas, this chrysalis is not ready to transform, and it should not have been born at this time. Who would have thought that God would make a fool of us, and it would die in the womb? It's so sad. These words were very abrupt in this silent atmosphere. But for Nangong Shui, these words were not only abrupt, but also harsh, vicious. Looking at Lin Sun's compassionate expression, Nangong Shui suddenly shivered, and he was so depressed that he wanted to vomit blood. This was too hateful. How could this happen? Nangong Shui was going crazy, and his heart was bleeding. What could be more heart-wrenching than having a great opportunity disappear in front of him for no reason? Nothing. Nangong Shui felt that the heavens were deliberately toying with him. Fellow Taoist Nangong, you were supposed to win this round for sure, but now, I somehow won. Fate really does make fools of us. Lin Sun sighed. Everyone's expressions became strange. Indeed, a dead chrysalis was far less valuable than a stalk of spirit-earned grass. In this gamble, Nangong Shui and the others had indeed lost. Not only did they lose a great opportunity, but they also had to pay 40,000 top-grade spiritual marrow. This was too heavy a blow. Puff! At this time, Nangong Shui was already trembling with anger, and blue veins were bulging on his forehead. The more he thought about it, the angrier he became. He was so angry that he coughed up a mouthful of blood. Looking at the young men and women around him, their faces were gloomy, unreconciled, annoyed, and confused. It seemed that they were about to suffer from internal injuries. This reversal was really too much of a blow. They had thought that a great opportunity was within their grasp, but who could have imagined that at the last moment, everything would change? Fellow Taoist Nangong, please take care of yourself. In my opinion, this is the will of the heavens. Everyone, please don't be too conflicted. It's only 40,000 high-grade spiritual marrow. Everyone here is a reputable person. I believe you can definitely afford it. Lin Sun looked serious. Everyone cursed in their hearts that this monk was too shameless. How could he still make sarcastic remarks after getting such a great advantage? Was he planning to anger Nangong Shui to death? Nangong Shui seemed to be unable to bear the provocation. He gritted his teeth and looked at Lin Sun with eyes as cold as a knife, as if he wanted to kill Lin Sun. But in the end, he restrained himself. This was the Stone Appraisal Convention, where there were many eyes and eyes. If he showed an attitude of being a sore loser, he would never be able to raise his head in ancient Sangzhou again. Bang! As if venting his anger, he threw the chrysalis away, took a deep breath, and said, "Monk, don't be so proud. It's just 40,000 top-grade spiritual marrow. I, Nangong Shui, am not a sore loser." Then he tossed out a storage pouch, turned around, and left. If he didn't leave now, he was afraid that he would lose control of his anger and kill people. Buddha said, "Put down the spiritual marrow," and turned back to the shore. Taoism, Pure Nangong, you were able to bear it and let it go. You deserve to be our role model. I will kindly accept these 40,000 top-grade spiritual marrow. Lin Sun said with a smile. In the distance, Nangong Shui staggered and almost fell down. Obviously, he was about to go crazy with anger. Everyone cursed this monk in their hearts. When did Buddha say such disgusting words as putting down the spiritual marrow? Everyone, you're all famous people. How can you leave without handing over the spiritual marrow? This is the Treasure Appraisal Convention. If you slip away, won't it be very shameful? Suddenly, Lin Sun said solemnly. He found that those young men and women were about to slip away, so he immediately stopped them. Those young men and women wanted to cry, but had no tears. Originally, they were going to participate in the slaughter of the fat sheep, But who would have thought that this fat sheep would counterattack at the last moment? Under the watchful eyes of so many people, they really had no face to go back on their words. Otherwise, they would have run away or killed people. In the end, they could only pinch their noses and accept it. Some people didn't bring enough spiritual marrow, so they used up all their belongings. Others couldn't get 40,000 top-grade spiritual marrow, even if they used up all their valuables. They thought that as a monk, the monk in front of them would never haggle over every penny and would let them go. Who would have thought that the monk directly asked them to sign an IOU if they didn't have money, and if they didn't return it for 3 months, they would double the principal and interest? Was this still a fucking benevolent monk? He was clearly a ruthless bandit. But in the end, they still had to sign such a heartless and humiliating IOU. The surrounding cultivators noticed all of this, and they couldn't help but sigh with emotion. This monk doesn't know anything about stone appraisal, and his luck is sometimes good and sometimes bad. Yet he just had to make a bet at the last moment to decide the outcome. This is too unusual. Was this really God's will? Hey, where's the pupa? Someone suddenly found that the black pupa had disappeared. It has long been thrown away by Nangong Shui. That thing has already lost its life fluctuation and is useless. Why do you still care about it? Someone laughed. At the same time, Lin Sun clenched his fist and put away the pupa when no one was paying attention. Chapter 1003. It was a yellow-robed young man with sword-like eyebrows, starry eyes, red lips, and white teeth. He had an outstanding bearing. If Lin Sun remembered correctly, he should be one of the successors of the Heaven's Pivot Holy Land, who came to the Stone Appraisal Conference with Chu Beihai. Monk, my eldest senior brother invites you. Come with me, the yellow-robed young man said casually and peacefully, but there was a faint conceit in his words. Who is your eldest senior brother? Lin Sun asked. The yellow-robed young man frowned slightly, and then a proud smile appeared on his lips. Chu Beihai. The 3 words seemed to have magic power, which made the pupils of the practitioners nearby shrink. It seemed that they didn't expect that Chu Beihai, the leader of the younger generation of the Heaven's Pivot Holy Land, would invite the monk at this moment. Was it because of the stone gambling just now? Many people were tempted. Well, I have something else to do. Forgive me for not being able to accept your invitation. If there is a chance in the future, I will visit you in person. Lin Sun refused without hesitation. He didn't know Chu Beihai at all, but Chu Beihai took the initiative to invite him at this moment, which was very unusual. Moreover, he had become enemies with Nangong Shui, Nangong Hua, and other successors of the Heaven's Pivot Holy Land, so he really didn't want to meet Chu Beihai at this time. How dare you refuse? The yellow-robed young man was stunned. This was an invitation from Senior Brother Chu. Which ordinary practitioner wouldn't obey him obediently? Haha, why can't I refuse? Lin Sun laughed. He could tell how proud the monk was from his words. Why don't you ask why Senior Brother Chu wants to see you? The yellow-robed young man was a little unhappy. He felt that the monk didn't give him any face even though he had come in person. It was obvious that the monk didn't know how to appreciate favors. Sorry, I have to go now. As he spoke, Lin Sun turned around and left without any hesitation. The more the yellow-robed young man behaved like this, the more Lin Sun felt something was wrong. You? The yellow-robed young man felt like going crazy. This monk was too arrogant. Did he think he didn't exist? But when he was about to stop the monk, he was surprised to find that the monk had completely disappeared in the blink of an eye. No, this guy obviously has a guilty conscience. The yellow-robed young man narrowed his eyes and hurried back to report the situation to Chu Beihai as soon as possible. In the deepest part of the garden, there were pavilions, terraces, and lakes. Chu Beihai sat at the head of the highest pavilion. His body was enshrouded in golden light, and his back was ramrod straight. Even though he was sitting casually, he still gave off an otherworldly feeling, as if he was a dragon and a tiger crouching there. Nangong Hua, Guyan Ting, and the other descendants of the Heavenly Pivot Holy Land sat around him, more or less reserved. Speaking of which, they could be considered as dazzling figures among the younger generation. They were well known in the ancient Song Prefecture. However, in front of Chu Beihai, they had no choice but to exercise restraint. From this, it could be seen how powerful Chu Beihai's might was. Eldest senior brother, that monk was just lucky. Why did you invite him over? Nangong Ho was dressed in a golden robe, looking as handsome as ever. This monk isn't simple, Chu Beihai said casually. His voice was like the chiming of jade pendants, and it carried a trace of power that could strike directly at one's heart. The bet between him and junior brother Nangong Shui is nothing much. What truly interests me is that this person actually dared to pretend to be the successor of the Xitigarbha temple. As he spoke up to hear, Chu Beihai's pair of eyes that were as clear as stars suddenly shot out two dazzling rays of lightning. It was like the crisscrossing of silver swords, incomparably terrifying. Pretending to be the successor of the Xitigarbha temple, everyone was startled. The Xitigarbha temple is an extremely mysterious holy land for Buddhist cultivators. Their background can be said to be terrifying, and they are not inferior to our heavenly pivot holy land. Chu Beihai's words were calm, but it attracted the attention of everyone present. Originally, I thought that there really was a successor of the Xitigarbha temple participating in this stone appraisal conference. However, I quickly discovered that this monk had disguised himself. Who dares to have such guts? Nangong Hua and the others were astonished. This is also what made me curious. The disguise technique that person used should be the great non-phase technique that was inherited from the heavenly fox of Qin Xiao. If it wasn't for the fact that I was born with the flaming golden eyes technique, I would have almost been fooled by him. As Chu Beihai spoke up to hear, he couldn't help but smile. From this, I can conclude that this child should also be an extremely powerful person. Therefore, I wanted to invite him to meet me. After all, the Great World War is coming, and it wouldn't be bad to get to know more interesting friends. Everyone came to a sudden understanding. At this moment, the yellow-robed young man hurriedly walked over and bowed. Eldest senior brother, the situation is not right. After hearing your invitation, the monk immediately slipped away. Everyone else was startled. Wasn't this guy too disrespectful? Didn't he know that senior brother Chu was waiting for him here? Chu Beihai smiled disapprovingly, and then said thoughtfully, "It seems that he doesn't want to reveal his identity." No. Why do I feel that he has a guilty conscience? Senior brother Chu, you don't even know that this monk looks harmless, but he doesn't know how to appreciate favors, and he slips away faster than anyone else. The yellow-robed young man was still brooding over Lin Sun's refusal, which made him lose face. Oh, Chu Beihai pondered for a moment, and suddenly waved his sleeve. A bright rain of light drifted out, and suddenly turned into a portrait. On the portrait, there was a handsome young man with a handsome appearance. He was dressed in a moon-white robe, and his temperament was quite extraordinary. Do you recognize this person? Chu Beihai asked. As soon as he finished speaking, Nangong Hua exclaimed in surprise, Why does he look so familiar? At the same time, Gu Yunting's expression changed slightly, and his eyes flickered. Martial uncle, it's him. A purple-robed young man suddenly stood up and shouted excitedly. The Tao Forbidden Stone that was sold on the stall was obtained by this person. What? An old man in a black robe nearby also darkened. Are you sure it's really him? I'm sure. The purple-robed young man replied resolutely. Seeing that everyone's reactions were different, but it was obvious that they all recognized this young man, Chu Beihai's eyes narrowed, and he said, Who is he? Lin Sun. Nangong Hua finally dared to confirm, and a trace of haze appeared on his face. He remembered the scene when he first descended to the lower realm and was kicked in the ass by Lin Sun in the Green Deer School. The shame that had been sealed in his heart for a long time also surged up. Yes, it's him. Gu Yunting also nodded, and his expression was slightly complicated. After a few years, he didn't expect to see the other party here. You all know this person? Chu Beihai vaguely realized that something was wrong with the situation. I would recognize him even if he turned into ashes. Nangong Hua gnashed his teeth and immediately introduced Lin Sun's identity. At the same time, Gu Yunting also spoke about some of Lin Sun's deeds in the Forbidden City in the lower realm. In that case, this kid is really bold. He was so arrogant in the lower realm, But after coming to the ancient desolation, not only did he not know how to restrain himself, he even dared to pretend to be the successor of the Xidigarba temple. He can be said to be unbridled. After listening to all of this, Chu Beihai made an evaluation. Lin Sun? Soon, someone cried out, "Brother Chu, this kid should be killed." Chapter 1004. This was a beautiful young girl with beautiful hair coiled into a bun and a crane cloak. She said quickly, "Recently, there was news that old monster Mo Shi, who was about to join our sect in the near future, was killed by a young man called Lin Sun. After the sect learned of this news, it issued an order to arrest this person. Instantly, the atmosphere in the hall changed. Old monster Mo Shi was a king stage existence, but he was killed by a young man. This news was too shocking. According to rumor, he relied on a king Dao restriction formation that he'd prepared meticulously a long time ago to trap old freaking Shi. His true strength is absolutely not so formidable," explained the beautiful young woman. The originally tense atmosphere immediately relaxed, and the descendants of the heavens' pivot holy land more or less heaved a sigh of relief. Chu Beihai's expression was cold. He was originally only curious about the guy who disguised himself as the successor of the Xidigarba temple. Who would have thought that he would inadvertently expose a guy called Lin Sun? Back in the lower realms, this kid had become enemies with Nangong Hua and the others. After that, he had snatched away the Dao restriction stone that originally belonged to their heaven's pivot holy land. Even during the bet just now, he had indirectly cheated Nangong Shui and the others of a large amount of spirit marrow. These might not be much, but when he found out that old monster Mo, she was also killed by Lin Sun, and that this guy was already wanted by their sect, Chu Beihai could not tolerate it. "Senior Brother Chu, we can't delay any longer. We must act immediately." Nangong was shouted. "The Dao restriction stone is still in his hands. We must snatch it away. The stone has a remnant of saint blood, and its origin is extraordinary. It is very likely that it contains a supreme spirit inscription inheritance." The black-robed old man could not sit still any longer. His name was Shui Jing, and he was a spirit inscription grandmaster of the heavens' pivot holy land. Naturally, he knew the value of the Dao restriction stone. Speaking of which, he was extremely vexed in his heart. When he saw this stone for the first time, he'd misjudged it and thought it was only an ordinary object. Only after he left did he suddenly recall that this extremely ordinary stone possessed an extremely extraordinary origin. However, when he sent the purple-robed youth to buy it, it was already a step too late. There has to be an explanation for Old Monster Inc. Shi's death. This is the sect's decision. We can't just stand by and watch. The beautiful girl also spoke up. "All right, this kid probably hasn't noticed that his identity has been exposed at this moment, so he probably hasn't fled too far away. Junior brother Gu Yunting, I'll leave the operation this time to you." Chu Beihai pondered for a moment and made a decision. "Me?" Gu Yunting was stunned. "You and this child come from the same place, and you understand his nature the best. With you taking action, I can be at ease," Chu Beihai said. But Gu Yunting was somewhat hesitant. To be honest, it was because he and Lin Sun came from the same place that he couldn't make a decision when he learned that they were going to hunt Lin Sun. It was true that he had conflicts with Lin Sun before, but that was in the past. It had been years, and he had long been indifferent to it. He didn't have the heart to organize people to deal with Lin Sun now. After all, they were both from the mortal world, and this was probably a kind of fellow countryman mentality. "What? Do you have any questions?" Chu Beihai's eyes were deep as he looked at Gu Yunting. His seemingly calm expression brought endless pressure to Gu Yunting. "All right." Gu Yunting braced himself and agreed. "Junior brother Nangong Hua, you will assist junior brother Gu Yunting in this operation. Remember, this kid is not simple, and his strength is bound to be extraordinary. You must not be careless. If necessary, you can ask the sect's half-step King Realm seniors to take action," Chu Beihai instructed. He had always been a good judge of character. From the description just now, he had already realized that this Lin Sun was definitely an incomparably troublesome person. If it was an ordinary cultivator, they wouldn't be able to bear such a serious warning. All right. Nangong Hua agreed without hesitation. He was already a little impatient to take revenge. Back then, he had been kicked in the butt by Lin Sun, causing him to be unable to raise his head for a long time after returning to the sect. Now, it was finally time for him to take revenge. After learning of this arrangement, Guyun Ting sighed in his heart. He knew that Chu Beihai obviously didn't completely trust him by doing this. Otherwise, why would he send another Nangong Hua to assist him? Rather than calling it assistance, it would be better to call it supervision. In addition, help me collect some information about this kid. I am very interested in him. If your operation this time is obstructed, I will personally go meet this guy who dares to pretend to be the successor of the Xitigarbha Temple after the Stone Appraisal Conference. As Chu Beihai said this, a terrifying power suddenly emerged from his body. It was like a golden rainbow that shot into the sky at this moment, startling the wind and clouds in all directions. After leaving the Stone Appraisal Conference, the more Lin Sun thought about it, the more he felt that something was wrong. This time, in order to conceal his identity and avoid being recognized by Guyun Ting, Nangong Hua, and the others, he deliberately disguised himself as the successor of the Xitigarbha Temple, Muzhong. Moreover, in the previous bet, he didn't show any behavior that was too out of line. However, it just so happened that Chu Beihai suddenly issued an invitation to him, which was very unusual. On the streets, the pedestrians were bustling, and it was bustling with noise and excitement. Lin Sun pondered as he walked towards the east side of the city. He had already inquired about the Heavenly Sword Sect, which was located in the central region of Dongxing Realm. It was dozens of provinces away from the ancient Song province, and the journey was extremely far. Even if he flew with the help of vast universe arc, it would take about a month at the fastest. For Lin Sun now, time was extremely precious. How could he waste it on the road? Finally, he decided to spend a lot of money to borrow the ancient transmission formations between the provinces and the provinces to go to the place where the Heavenly Sword Sect was located. This time in Green Flame City, the harvest is not small. At the thought of the harvest, Lin Sun couldn't help but smile. First of all, he found a mysterious stone that was very likely to contain the inheritance of spiritual tattoos from a street stall. Then he sold the treasures that he didn't need and exchanged them for more than 100,000 pieces of upper spiritual marrow. Although he had left halfway through the Stone Appraisal Convention, he had made another 280,000 high-grade spiritual essence and several IOUs through a huge gamble. Regrettably, those IOUs would probably not be of use anymore. In addition, there was a greater harvest, which was a pupa that bred the sky-splitting demon butterfly. Thinking of this, Lin Sun couldn't help but feel pity for Nangong Shui, who was almost driven mad by him. The life fluctuation of the pupa was not destroyed, but the breath of the spirit-eating insect scared the pupa into withdrawing its life fluctuation. It was ridiculous that Nangong Shui, who was exasperated at that time, threw away the treasure as garbage, which benefited Lin Sun. Since no one could identify the strange stone at the treasure appraisal conference, how could it attract Chu Beihai's attention and even come in person? It's normal. Chu Beihai was born with the talent of golden eyes of flame, which can see through the falsehood that ordinary people can't see through. Maybe he can see through the mystery of that strange stone. Suddenly, the conversation between two practitioners on the street attracted Lin Sun's attention. Golden eyes of flame? Lin Sun was shocked, and his face changed slightly. He finally realized what was wrong. Chu Beihai had obviously seen through his disguise at the Stone Appraisal Conference. In this way, as long as Chu Beihai revealed his true face, his identity would definitely be seen through by Nangong Hua and Gu Yunting. It's a little troublesome. Lin Sun sighed in his heart. He didn't expect that his identity would be exposed because of Chu Beihai. I have to get out of here as soon as possible. Lin Sun took a deep breath and realized the seriousness of the situation. Not only did he have old enmity with Nangong Hua, but he had also killed old monster Emo Shi. If the people of Heaven's Pivot Holy Land knew that Lin Sun was in the city, there was bound to be a chase. Whoosh! His figure flashed, and he sped up his pace, rushing out of the city. Chapter 1005. So. One figure after another was like a bolt of lightning, riding on a beautiful escape light, whistling through the air. Nangong Hua, the successor of the heavens, pivot Holy Land. Gu Yunting, the successor of the heavens, pivot Holy Land. Heavens, why are they all successors of the heavens, pivot Holy Land? What are they doing? What a huge battle array. On the bustling streets of Jade Flame City, there were countless cultivators, but when they noticed the beautiful escape light that surged like a tide, they were all shocked. Something big is definitely going to happen. Many cultivators felt a chill in their hearts, realizing that this was very unusual. Quick, go and inform the experts of the Wind Whisperer clan. These guys are the most well-informed. They will definitely be able to find out what exactly is going on. The Heavens Pivot Holy Land was the #1 orthodoxy in the ancient Azure province. But now, many of the successors of this orthodoxy had moved out together, causing such a huge scene. It would be difficult for it not to attract attention. Buzz. At the same time, an ancient bronze mirror floated in Nangonghua's hand. The mirror was round, snow-white and bright, and the back was as black as ink. This was an ancient treasure called the Yin and Yang Spirit Lock Mirror. As long as one captured a wisp of the opponent's aura and injected it into the treasure, it would firmly lock onto them. Even if one changed their appearance and hid their tracks, they would still be firmly caught by the Yin and Yang Spirit Lock Mirror. When this child was gambling, he left behind a lot of aura. According to Senior Chu Beihai's deduction, with this Yin and Yang Soul Lock Mirror, even if he uses the great non-phase technique, he will not be able to escape our pursuit. Nangonghua was very proud. A cold smile hung on his lips. This ancient Azure province is the territory of our heavens' pivot Holy Land. If he can escape this time, I, Nangonghua, can even cut my own throat. How should I use this treasure? Gu Yunting asked. Nangonghua laughed. Junior Gu, you only need to help us hunt down this child. With a single sentence, Gu Yunting realized that not only Chu Beihai, but Nangonghua was also on guard against him. As far as I know, Lin Sun is not simple. Senior Nangong, you better be careful. Back then in the forbidden city of the lower realm, you also experienced how powerful this person is. Gu Yunting said indifferently. What do you mean? Nangonghua's face darkened. Gu Yunting's words reminded him of the humiliating scene of Lin Sun kicking his butt. It's nothing. I'm in charge of this operation. I have the obligation to remind you to be careful, senior brother. Don't be careless because of this Yin and Yang Spirit Lock Mirror. If something goes wrong, the responsibility is not something you and I can bear, Gu Yunting said indifferently. Don't worry. This time I won't torture Lin Sun until he begs for death. I will personally apologize to Brother Chu. Nangonghua gnashed his teeth fiercely. Buzz. Right at this moment, the bronze mirror floating in front of him flashed and produced a buzzing sound. The Yin and Yang energies formed a cryptic symbol. I've caught the scent of the prey. It's over there. Chase. Nangonghua's mind was shaken. A cold light shot out from his eyes as he gave the order. Crash, the group of descendants of the heavenly pivot Holy Land followed closely behind Nangonghua and the others, flying towards the east of Jade Flame City. This time, the descendants of the heavenly pivot Holy Land had 15 true disciples and 33 inner disciples. Besides that, there were over 100 lackeys in attendance by the side of these disciples, and it was absolutely an extremely elite force. At least in the ancient Azure province, they could do whatever they wanted. Moreover, if necessary, with the identity of the descendants of the heavenly pivot Holy Land, Nangonghua and the others could also mobilize the cultivation forces in the major cities of the ancient Azure province to help them act together. This was the most terrifying part. It could be said that the heavenly pivot Holy Land was an overlord of the ancient Azure province. With an order, the cultivation forces in the ancient Azure province would have to obey. This was the power of the ancient orthodoxy. It was like the emperor of the cultivation world. No one dared to disobey. The setting sun was like fire. The ancient and towering city walls were already in sight. There are three ancient transmission arrays in the ancient Azure province. One is in the heavenly pivot Holy Land, one is in Sandcloud City, and one is in Gungmu City. Among them, Sandcloud City is the closest to Jade Flame City. We can reach it in about half a day. Lin Sun was thinking about the route to leave the ancient Azure province as he walked towards the city gate. But at this moment, he suddenly stopped and turned his head to look. In the extremely distant horizon, the sunset glow was like fire, and there were numerous gorgeous streaks whistling over here. They were dense like the rain, and they covered the heavens and the earth in an overbearing manner. Nangong Hua and Gu Yunting. Lin Sun's spiritual awareness spread out and instantly saw the appearance of the two leaders. His eyes narrowed, and he realized that he had been completely exposed. Moreover, it was useless to run by in chi to cover his breath. The other side obviously had some kind of tracking method or treasure that could firmly lock on him. Otherwise, it was impossible for them to catch up in such a short time. Whoosh! Without hesitation, Lin Sun flashed out of the city. His voice and appearance also changed, and he restored his true appearance. Although running the traceless method could change his appearance, it would lose its effect if he really fought. The reason was very simple. After all, he was not a descendant of the Green Mountain Celestial Fox, so he could not deduce the real mystery of the traceless method. Outside the city, there were boundless mountains and forests, rising and falling, connecting with the sky. Lin Sun was not in a hurry to escape. He was very curious about how many powerful figures the heavens' pivot Holy Land had sent to deal with him. At the peak of a steep mountain, he floated down, turned around, and waited quietly. His robe fluttered in the wind, and he looked extraordinary. Lin Sun, it really is you, a guy who hides his head and shows his tail. Not long after, Nangong Hua and the others caught up. The bright escape light was like a rainstorm, dyeing the void there into a magnificent color. It was extremely shocking. Lin Sun, it's really you. Gu Yunting's eyes were a little complicated. After not seeing him for a few years, the young man who walked out of the wilderness of the Empire had also changed a lot. His cultivation was stronger, and his aura was more stable and calm. He had a kind of extraordinary demeanor, completely different from back then. This is the Lin Sun who killed old monster Emoshi. He looks just SOSO. The other descendants of the heavens' pivot Holy Land were also sizing him up, with a touch of pride and disdain on their faces. On the way here, they had already heard that Lin Sun was a ruthless character from the lower realms. He was cunning, unscrupulous, and extremely difficult to deal with. But now, it seemed that he was merely a skinny young man who was all alone, and he didn't seem to have anything to fear about him. You only have this many people, even though he was surrounded by a group of descendants of the heavens' pivot Holy Land. Lin Sun seemed very calm and casual. With a glance, he could tell that although there were many enemies in the field, not many of them could withstand a fight. Obviously, the other party had not truly figured out his strength and trump cards. You're still as arrogant as before. Nangong Hua was so angry that he laughed. This is the ancient Azure province, the territory of my heaven's pivot Holy Land. You actually don't know that you're about to die. Should I say that you're crazy or stupid? Lin Sun, stop. This time, it's really hard for you to escape. If you lower your head, I will do my best to plead for you. After all, you also came out of the Green Deer Academy, and your foundation and strength can be said to be the best. I believe that as long as you take the initiative to atone for your sins, Senior Chu Beihai, who has always cherished talent, will not make things too difficult for you. Gu Yunting sighed and spoke seriously, wanting to take the initiative to summon Lin Sun, because he was very clear that in the ancient Azure province, not to mention Lin Sun, even a king stage ranker would not be able to escape once they were targeted by the heavens' pivot Holy Land. Bullshit. This child's sins are so grave. How can we let him off so easily? Nangong Hua was annoyed. Gu Yunting, Senior Chu asked you to capture and kill the enemy, not to exonerate the enemy. Senior Nangong is right. Senior Gu, what you're doing is a bit wrong. The other descendants of the heavens' pivot Holy Land also frowned, expressing their dissatisfaction with Gu Yunting's actions. I just don't want everyone to go to war. Do we really have to fight and kill? Gu Yunting said in a deep voice. Lin Sun was a little surprised and couldn't help but look at Gu Yunting. Shut up. Nan Gonghua's expression was cold. Do you know why Senior Chu Beihai wants you to control this operation? It's to test if you're loyal to the sect. Now it seems that there's something wrong with you. Are you trying to slander me? Gu Yunting was also angry. Cut the crap. Now you stay at the side. The other junior brothers, listen up. If this child doesn't surrender, kill without mercy, Nan Gonghua directly ordered. As he spoke, he stared at Lin Sun with a cold gaze and said, Look, even Gu Yunting can't save you now. What else do you have to say? He was very proud, thinking that he had already grasped the situation. Do you think that I'm staying here to surrender? Lin Sun also laughed. This Nan Gonghua really hadn't changed at all. He was still as brainless as before. Are you fucking stupid? Nan Gonghua's face was filled with astonishment. They had mobilized a large force this time. It could be said that the experts were as numerous as the trees in the forest. Under such circumstances, Lin Sun was still as arrogant as before. Did he really not know how to write the word death? If it was a slightly more normal cultivator, they would probably restrain themselves a little at a time like this. They would either despair or be terrified. How could they be like this guy, who was like a dead pig that wasn't afraid of boiling water? The other descendants of the heavens, Pivot Holy Land, were also speechless. In the ancient Azure province, they only needed to reveal their identities to scare the majority of the cultivators out of their wits. However, the young man in front of them was very abnormal. This was the first time they had seen such a reckless character. That's right, you're just a bumpkin from the lower realms. It's normal for you to not know the immensity of heaven and earth. I've overestimated you. Nan Gonghua sneered, as if he had suddenly understood something. This explanation was reasonable. The ignorant were fearless. Wasn't this the kind of person that they were talking about? Don't forget, Senior Brother Chu once reminded us that Lin Sun is not an ordinary person. Do you really think he's ignorant? Gu Yunting frowned and reminded him from the side. He really couldn't stand it any longer. How could an expert who could use a king formation to trap and kill old monster MO, she be an ignorant person? You traitor! Even at a time like this, you're still speaking up for that brat. Hurry up and shut up. Nan Gonghua's face was gloomy as he shouted. At the same time, Nan Gonghua waved his hand. Everyone, it's impossible for an ignorant fool to surrender. Let's do it. P.S. Goldfish knew that once this chapter was published, she would be scolded for being brainless again. However, the text had already said that they still did not know Lin Sun's strength and trump card. They still did not know that the person in front of them was the demon god Lin. They even thought that Lin Sun had used the king formation to kill old monster Mo Shi. And in the ancient Azure province, it was the territory of their heaven's Pivot Holy Land. In addition, they had a large number of people, allowing them to believe that they had the confidence to be arrogant and look down on Lin Sun. This was the cognitive error caused by the difference in information. Chapter 1006. Let me do it. Just as Nan Gonghua finished speaking, an incomparably capable man had already rushed out. His skin seemed to be made of bronze, his body was strong and full of explosive power, and his eyes were as sharp as an eagle's. Boom! As he moved, the void was forcefully torn apart by his figure, emitting an ear-piercing roar. At this moment, it was as if an ancient divine leopard had moved out. That swift and fierce aura was not something an ordinary successor could compare to. This was Xiao Zheng, one of the successor disciples of the Heaven's Pivot Holy Land, a genius of the reincarnation development stage. He was brave and good at fighting, and the blood of war flowed in his body. He was extremely powerful. This guy is going to have a tragedy. When Nan Gonghua and the others saw this, they all revealed expressions of pity. Amongst the successor disciples of the Heaven's Pivot Holy Land, Xiao Zheng might not be the strongest, nor was his talent the best, but he was the most bloodthirsty madman. All those who he viewed as his opponents had already turned into bones and were eternally destroyed in this world. Lin Sun, Senior Brother Chu once said to be careful of you, thinking that you are a troublesome person. I'm looking forward to seeing just how strong you are. Xiao Zhang's voice was like his, sonorous like the sound of metal clashing, emitting a bone-piercing killing intent, causing the void to wail. Use your strongest ability. Otherwise, I'll twist off your head and use it to drink wine. A wisp of a wild arc appeared on the corners of his mouth, and he stared at Lin Sun as if he was staring at his prey. Lin Sun's expression did not change as he slowly said, "If it's against you, you really aren't qualified for me to use my strongest technique." Xiao Zhang's eyes were like lightning as his long hair fluttered in the wind. He laughed loudly and said, "You're crazy enough. I hope that when you die, you can also be so arrogant." Boom! As he spoke, he had already stepped into the air. His figure was like a bolt of lightning as he charged towards Lin Sun. Before he even arrived, a fierce and bloody killing intent had already pressed down on him like a stormy sea, causing one to feel suffocated. How was this like a person? It was clearly like a god of death that had rushed out from a mountain of corpses and a sea of blood. Junior brother Xiao Zhang's killing intent is becoming more and more condensed. Nangonghua and the others exclaimed in their hearts. Dong! Xiao Zhang's attack was very simple. His palms and fingers were like blades, chopping down forcefully. It seemed very violent. But so long as one had the slightest discerning ability, one would be able to discern that this strike of Xiao Zhang's carried a great momentum of dominating the world. The might of his palm enveloped the surroundings, and it caused others to arouse a helpless feeling of being unable to escape or avoid it. Even Lin Sun couldn't help but be surprised. He could see that Xiao Zhang was a top figure with real ability. Just this blow showed that he had amazing attainments in martial arts. Unfortunately, for Lin Sun, this blow was still not strong enough. He similarly pressed out with his palm in a casual manner, as if he was casually scribbling, completely ordinary and ordinary. Boom! The two collided, shaking the heavens and earth. Then, Xiao Zhang's palm energy was obliterated inch by inch, bursting into a blazing rain of light. He was greatly shocked as he acutely sensed that his palm seemed as if it was enveloped by a large abyss, and it was on the verge of being swallowed. Dragon Battle Seal! Xiao Zhang roared. His vigorous body burst out blazing brilliance, and his power became more and more ferocious. He swung his arms and stepped on a dipper, trying to destroy Lin Sun's strike. But the result chilled his heart. Lin Sun's palm energy was as deep as an abyss, which seemed to be able to swallow everything. Crack! The next moment, he only felt a sharp pain. The tendons and bones of his palms and fingers were broken, and blood burst out. Oh no! He had rich experience in battles. Realizing that the situation was not good, he did not hesitate to withdraw. Unexpectedly, at this moment, Lin Sun turned his palm into a claw and suddenly clenched it forward, like a prison falling from the sky. Crack! Another sound of tendons and bones breaking rang out. Xiao Zhang's neck was twisted by the big hand before he had time to scream. At the moment of death, his eyes were wide open with a look of disbelief. How could a young man from the mortal world be so strong? All this took a long time to describe, but in fact, from Xiao Zhang's attack to Lin Sun breaking his neck, a series of actions ended in the blink of an eye. It was too fast. It was so fast that no one present had time to react. The pity on the faces of Nangonghua and the others suddenly froze, as if they had been struck by lightning. Previously, in everyone's opinion, even if Lin Sun did not die this time, he would at least lose a layer of skin. But now they almost cried out. Xiao Zhang had just attacked, and in an instant his neck was broken. This was too shocking. Those who did not know would think that Lin Sun was killing a chicken or a monkey. But Nangonghua and the others all knew that Xiao Zhang was very strong. As one of the true disciples of the Heaven's Pivot Holy Land, he even dared to challenge a half-step king realm existence in the reincarnation development realm. But now he had died just like that, like a dead dog. He was held in Lin Sun's hands. You can't even block one of my attacks, and you still dare to clamor to use my head as a wine cup. You really deserve to die. Lin Sun casually threw away Xiao Zhang's body, as if he was throwing away garbage. Hiss! The sound of gasping could be heard. The expressions of the descendants of the heavens pivot holy land completely changed. They looked at Lin Sun with shock and anger, as well as unprecedented seriousness. Only now did they realize that the young man in front of them was not someone they could bully at will. Even Gu Yunting was stunned for a moment. He did not expect that in just a few years, the youth that he did not put in his eyes had grown to such an extent. What had he experienced in these past few years? You dare to kill? Nan Gonghua's face was ashen as he cried out involuntarily. To be able to say such stupid words, it could be seen that he was also shocked by this scene, and his mind was in turmoil. Why wouldn't I dare to kill? Just because you are the descendants of the heavens' pivot holy land? Lin Sun's figure was elegant as he stood alone at the peak of the mountain. His temperament was like the clouds in the sky, indifferent and otherworldly. But when he said this, Nan Gonghua and the others felt a chill in their hearts. Originally, their greatest reliance was their numbers, and they were confident that they could capture and kill Lin Sun. However, Xiao Zheng's death made them deeply realize how terrifying their opponent this time was. It was definitely not as simple as they had imagined. What made their hearts palpitate the most was that the other party did not have any scruples at all. Even though he knew that they were from the heavens' pivot holy land, he still dared to kill them without hesitation. From beginning to end, he still had a calm and composed appearance. This was too terrifying. A demon who killed without blinking an eye was only SOSO. Go back and tell Chu Beihai that I have no intention of going against the heavens' pivot sacred land. This is only a small punishment. However, if you still want to be my enemy, then you should first think about whether you can withstand my anger. After Lin Sun finished speaking, he turned around and left. Left? Nan Gonghua's expression was unsettled as he gnashed his teeth. This time, he was full of ambition to take revenge. However, he never thought that he would suffer such a setback the moment he started. This caused him to feel so aggrieved that he was about to vomit blood. The other descendants of the heavens' pivot holy land were the same. This was the first time they had seen someone kill their people like killing chickens in their own territory. That kind of casual attitude brought an unprecedented shock to their minds. Only Gu Yunting sighed in his heart. He knew that Lin Sun's words were useless. In the ancient Song province, whether it was for revenge, for Xiao Zheng, or for other reasons, it was impossible for the heavens' pivot holy land to let him leave alive. Sure enough, just as Lin Sun left, a group of figures flew over from the distant horizon. The one leading them was Nan Gongshui. Behind him, there was a group of half-step King Realm experts with extremely astonishing auras. There were men and women, and they all had different appearances, but they were all extremely powerful. After learning of Xiao Zheng's death, Nan Gongshui couldn't help but feel vexed. He beat his chest and stamped his feet. I'm still a step late. Brother Chu was right. Nan Gonghua and the others were stunned and couldn't help but ask. Brother Chu had already guessed all of this? Nan Gongshui said, When I came, Brother Chu obtained some news about Lin Sun. Only then did I know that this person was even more terrifying than I had expected. A few days ago, in the West Hung Realm, he told them all the rumors about Lin Sun in the West Hung Realm. When they learned that Lin Sun's reputation had already spread throughout the West Hung Realm, they couldn't help but gasp, and their hands and feet felt cold. Demon Lin? This guy was actually such a ruthless person. That's why Brother Chu ordered me and a group of martial uncles to come to help. I didn't expect that we were still a step late. Nan Gongshui sighed. Does Brother Chu have any other instructions? Gu Yunting couldn't help but ask. Yes. This time, it was a hale and hearty old man with yellow hair who spoke. He said in a deep voice, At all costs, we must kill this guy. Moreover, we have already reported to the sect. We will send more forces to set up an inescapable net in the entire ancient Song province, so that this guy can't escape even if he has wings. Hearing this arrangement, Gu Yunting was frightened. There was no doubt that in order to kill Lin Sun, the heavens' pivot holy land was going all out. However, no matter how strong Lin Sun was, he was just one person. Was it really necessary to do so? Gu Yunting was very puzzled. The others were also stunned. The heavens' pivot holy land was an ancient orthodoxy. If the world knew that in order to hunt down Demon Lin, they would not hesitate to set up an inescapable net, they would probably be laughed at. That's because you don't understand the value of this guy. He has great fortune hidden in him. Not to mention us, if other forces knew about it, they would also capture him at all costs. The yellow-haired old man looked indifferent. It's also because of this reason that this guy was chased by many forces in the West Hung realm. He had no choice but to escape to the East Shung realm to take refuge. I see. Everyone was enlightened. There's no time to lose. Let's start. At the same time, Lin Sun frowned. The reason why he left previously was not out of kindness. He had originally planned to take action and kill all the guys who were chasing him. Who would have thought that he sensed an even more powerful aura rapidly approaching? Out of caution, he chose to leave decisively. Previously, they sent Nan Gong Hua and the others to kill him because they did not know his strength and trump cards. But now, it was most likely different. Lin Sun was very clear that as long as someone was willing to inquire about his deeds in the West Hung realm, they would definitely be able to find out. And with Chu Beihai's identity and means, obtaining such information was just a matter of moving his lips. The situation is more troublesome than I expected. Lin Sun had a premonition that there was bound to be an immeasurable storm on the road ahead. If it was in the past, Lin Sun would definitely be worried and anxious about this. He would rack his brains to think of a way to escape. But now, he was different from before. Even if he encountered an old monster of the King realm, he would have the courage to fight with him. Chapter 1007. Whoosh. Without hesitation, Lin Sun took out the vast universe arc and rushed to Cloud Sand City at full speed. The enemy had an extremely powerful tracking ability and was also the overlord of the ancient Song province. Once the enemy made the most adequate arrangements, it would be difficult for Lin to leave the ancient Song province. In short, Lin Sun was not afraid of threats now, but he didn't want to waste time on endless troubles. He had more important things to do. For example, go to the heaven-reaching Sword Sect, Cloud Sand City located on the edge of a vast desert in the ancient Song province. Legend has it that this desert was originally a paradise for immortal cultivators with verdant hills, clear waters, and dense spirit chi. However, it encountered a great calamity later on and was destroyed by a supreme demonic weapon in the hands of an ancient great sage. Then mountains and rivers collapsed, rivers dried up, and the earth cracked. As time went by, this place became a vast desert, because the desert was filled with fierce, killing spirit, which was like a mortal demonic energy that never disappeared. It was called Refining Desert by practitioners. Cloud Sand City was located near the Refining Desert. Whoosh! A figure came from distance and turned into a middle-aged man with a curly beard. He landed on the ground and walked towards Cloud Sand City. This man was Lin Sun in disguise. As soon as he arrived outside the city gate, Lin Sun saw a wanted portrait of a handsome young man posted on the top of the city gate. Below the portrait, the wanted content was marked. This man is Lin Sun, nicknamed Demon Lin. He is extremely vicious and poisonous. Anyone who can provide clues about him will be rewarded with 10,000 top-grade spiritual essence. At this moment, there were numerous cultivators watching from the sidelines, and they were pointing at the warrant and discussing it. This man is wanted by the heavens, pivot holy land. He must be a devil who does all kinds of evil. I wonder what kind of infuriating thing he has done to be wanted like this. People were talking about it. Lin Sun was shocked. He didn't expect that the heavens' pivot holy land would act so fast. He even suspected that not only Cloud Sand City in front of him, but also other cities in the ancient Song province have begun to have similar wanted posters. If it's just for revenge, it's impossible for an ancient orthodoxy to mobilize so many people. Obviously, they have other plans. While thinking, Lin Sun walked towards the city. At the center of the city stood an ancient altar that was branded with a mottled aura of time. It was suffused with an obscure and profound aura of restriction fluctuations. This was an ancient teleportation portal. Only a saint who had mastered the profound meaning of the sky could set up such a teleportation formation, allowing cultivators to traverse the boundless void in the blink of an eye and appear thousands of miles away. In the past, this teleportation ancient formation was extremely busy. Many Xiozhou would use this ancient formation to head to other places in Dongshangjia. But today, the ancient teleportation array was completely sealed. Groups of Xiozhou troops were like iron walls that guarded the transportation formation. There were even Xiozhou standing guard high up in the void. Why do you have to seal it just like that? This ancient teleportation formation is a relic left behind by an ancient saint. It will benefit hundreds of generations and benefit everyone. Why won't you let us borrow it? Some Xiozhou shouted angrily. It's just a fiend celestial Lin of unknown origins, yet he wants to seal the teleportation ancient array. Does this mean that every demon that appears in the future will have to do the same? Some other Xiozhou shouted along with him. Obviously, these Xiozhou were like Lin Sun and wanted to use the teleportation ancient formation to travel. But now that they were refused entry, they were naturally very displeased. This is the decree of the heavens, pivot Holy Land. If you're dissatisfied, feel free to go argue with the heavens, pivot Holy Land. If you continue to make noise, believe it or not, I'll capture all of you. In the void, a mighty old man shouted loudly. His voice was like a thunderclap that shook the surroundings. Instantly, those dissatisfied voices went silent. Even the heavens, pivot Holy Land can't be so overbearing. I'll give you a chance. Open this formation. Lin Sun spoke as he strode forward. This was their only chance to leave. If they waited for the forces of the heavens, pivot Holy Land to chase after them, then it would be too late. Who do you think you are? How dare you threaten me? The mighty old man's face sank, and a shapeless aura spread out and deterred everyone present. He was the lord of Sandcloud City, and his name was Yang Chenghua. He possessed a cultivation at the half-step monarch realm, and his aura was extremely powerful. Bang! Lin Sun strode forward in the void, and his figure swiftly arrived before Yang Chenghua. He stretched out his arm and grabbed, and his palm and fingers were like a dragon leaving an abyss, and they were coiled with dazzling radiance as they enveloped down towards Yang Chenghua. Yang Chenghua was so angry that he started laughing. He'd never imagined that this middle-aged man would actually be so arrogant and actually dare to make a move against him. Could it be that this middle-aged man doesn't know how the word death is written? Fuck off! Yang Chenghua shouted loudly as he collided head-on with Lin Sun. But to his surprise, his attack didn't even have the time to exert its might before it was obliterated and dispersed, whereas the large hand had already grabbed towards him in an irresistible manner. Shit! Yang Chenghua's expression changed abruptly, but it was already a step too late. Lin Sun directly grabbed his neck, and then Yang Chenghua was fiercely thrown down into the void like trash. Bang! Yang Chenghua fell fiercely on the hard ground with his face facing the ground, and he smashed out a large pit while stone fragments shot out in all directions. Blood sprayed from his mouth and nose while his body twitched, and he let out a shrill cry. The surroundings were deathly silent, and everyone was dumbfounded. In the blink of an eye, Yang Chenghua, a half-step monarch realm expert who'd made a name for himself for many years, had actually been suppressed just like this. Crack! Lin Sun descended from the sky and stepped on Yang Chenghua's body with a cold look. I'll say it for the last time. Open this formation. Please don't be angry, fellow practitioner. Yang Chenghua was old and shrewd. How could he not know that he had kicked an iron plate this time? He immediately bowed his head and admitted defeat. It's just that it's impossible to open this formation now. Isn't the talisman to activate this formation with you? Lin Sun frowned. Yes. Yang Chenghua hurriedly said, since we decided to block this place, the restriction talisman of this formation has been sent to the heavens pivot Holy Land as soon as possible. The ancient transmission formation was left by the ancient sages, so it naturally couldn't be opened at will. Only with the corresponding restriction talisman could this formation be activated and controlled. Lin Sun, as a Grand Master of spiritual tattoos, naturally knew this very well. In this case, why do you still block this place? Isn't it superfluous? Lin Sun looked cold, and his killing intent was released without concealment. Yang Qingbo trembled all over and felt cold all over. Only from this killing intent, he realized that this was a ruthless person who absolutely dared to kill him without hesitation. This is the Order of the Heavens Pivot Holy Land. The purpose is to draw out Demon Lin and capture him. Speaking of this, Yang Qingbo seemed to realize something. His face suddenly changed, and he cried out involuntarily, You shouldn't bang." Before he could finish his words, he was kicked unconscious by Lin Sun and collapsed on the ground. Looking at the surroundings again, all the cultivators were dumbfounded, as though they were extremely shocked. Lin Sun didn't give up and interrogated some practitioners who blocked the transmission formation. Without exception, they all said that what Yang Qingbo said was true and the restriction talisman of the ancient formation was gone. Trouble. Lin Sun sighed in his heart. There were only 3 transmission formations in ancient Song province. One in the Heavens Pivot Holy Land, one in Sandcloud City, and the other in Jangwood City. But Lin Sun already knew that the situation in Jangwood City was the same. It was impossible to use the transmission formation. Does the Heavens Pivot Holy Land really plan to trap me in ancient Song province? Lin Sun also had an irrepressible killing intent in his heart. Without the talisman of the ancient formation, even if Lin Sun was a grandmaster of spiritual tattoos, he couldn't open the transmission formation. After all, it was left by the ancient sages. The restriction on it involved the ultimacy of space shifting, which was not something he could crack. In this case, I'd like to see if your blockade can really trap me. Whoosh! Lin Sun's figure flashed, and he flew away. It was not safe to stay here for a long time. Who is this man? He's too horrible. He is only at the reincarnation developing realm, but he can defeat a half-step king realm practitioner in a flash. How can there be such a fierce person in the world? Until Lin Sun left, the oppressive atmosphere in the field dissipated. Many practitioners breathed a sigh of relief and couldn't help but exclaim, Who else can it be? It must be Demon Lin in disguise. Yes, it must be him. I just didn't expect this guy to be so powerful. No wonder the Heavens Pivot Holy Land attached so much importance to him and issued a wanted order to the entire ancient Song province. In this way, no matter how fierce this person is, I'm afraid it won't be long before he is killed. After all, the power of the Heavens Pivot Holy Land is not something he can fight alone. Whoosh! Whoosh! Not long after, a group of experts from the Heavens Pivot Holy Ground flew streaks of light, like an army of locusts that blotted out the sky and covered the earth, crushing the clouds. They covered the sky and the sun, and their momentum shocked the world. When he learned what happened here, Nangong suddenly became angry. He escaped again. Where'd he go? The yin and yang spirit lock mirror shows that he has fled to the absolute refining desert. Mobilize all forces and seal the absolute refining desert. Immediately, this formidable army didn't delay in the slightest and moved out once more. They flashed through the sky above Sandcloud City and flashed towards the desert of absolute refinement. On this day, the ancient Song province was shocked. The wanted order from the Heavens Pivot Holy Land shocked countless practitioners and caused an uproar. Who is this Demon Lin? This was the doubt of most practitioners, because before this, they had almost never heard of such a person in the world. But there was no doubt that from today on, this young man, who was regarded as Demon Lin, had begun to enter people's vision. Many forces were taking action. They obeyed the orders of the Heavens Pivot Holy Land and launched layer after layer of blockades in the ancient Song province. For a time, the cities in various regions of the ancient Song province were filled with a tense atmosphere. A storm was coming. Because the movement was too big, it also made all the practitioners more and more aware that this time the Heavens Pivot Holy Land was determined to eradicate this Demon Lin. In the vast desert, Lin Sun was flying. Out of caution, he did not use the vast universe Arkansas. Firstly, this treasure would consume a lot of spiritual marrow. Chapter 1008. If the vast universe arc was used to escape in a critical moment, it would be able to display its greatest value. To use it now was far too wasteful. Lin Sun used vast universe arc to go to Sand Cloud City because he was in a hurry. But now, the ancient transmission formation couldn't be used anymore. What Lin Sun needed to consider now was how to safely break through the tight encirclement of the heavens' pivot holy land, so as to achieve the purpose of leaving ancient Song province. However, Lin Sun didn't expect that he would be blocked in less than an hour after he entered the desert of absolute refinement. You stop. A group of practitioners stood in front of Lin Sun in a row, with a stern look on their faces. Seeing Lin Sun coming, a man as thin as bamboo shouted sternly, "Stay here and be interrogated. If you don't obey, you will be killed without mercy." Killed without mercy? Lin Sun said to himself. At a glance, he knew that these practitioners were not from the heavens' pivot holy land. They should be other forces under the command of the heavens' pivot holy land. Yes, the desert of absolute refinement is blocked. Even a fly can't fly out, let alone you. The skinny man said in a low voice. Lin Sun nodded and continued to move forward, treating these practitioners as if they were nothing. It seemed that he was going to break through the blockade. "How arrogant you are! Let's do it!" The skinny man was stunned and then shouted. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Immediately, a group of practitioners who had been waiting for a long time rose into the air and surrounded Lin Sun. They were not ordinary people. They were all ruthless characters who lived on the edge of a knife. Unfortunately, they met Lin Sun this time. Boom! Before they got close, Lin Sun suddenly released a terrible momentum all over his body and spread out. Those practitioners only felt dizzy. Their bodies seemed to be swept by a storm that tore the sky apart, and then they were thrown out fiercely. In the next moment, thumping resounded incessantly as these cultivators fell all over the place, and they saw stars before their eyes. When they looked at Lin Sun again, there was no sign of him. How horrible! These practitioners' faces changed greatly. If Lin Sun had been ruthless just now, wouldn't they have no ability to resist? On the way, Lin Sun encountered several blockades and obstacles in succession, but they couldn't stop him at all. Even so, Lin Sun felt a little troubled. If it went on like this, something would happen sooner or later. He decided to change his strategy. In the vast desert, the scorching sun hung high in the sky, incomparably sinister. An army of sand idols of different sizes and appearances were stationed there. A sand puppet was actually a type of puppet that was refined using a secret technique. So long as it was provided with spiritual marrow, it would be able to act according to the instructions of a cultivator. For example, fighting, mining, planting herbs, and so on. The higher the grade of the sand puppet, the more powerful it would be. For example, this sand puppet army was a battle-type sand puppet. Each of them was worth tens of thousands of taels of gold and possessed the fighting power of the reincarnation development realm. Sect Master, have we mobilized too many people this time? These battle sand puppets are the foundation of our sect. If anything were to happen to them, it would be a huge loss. A young man stood in the distance, looking a little confused. He did not understand why the sect would spend so much money this time. You don't understand. If we can capture this demon god Lin, it would be worth it even if we lose a few combat sand puppets. A middle-aged man with his hands clasped behind his back and a dignified look appeared on his face. His name was Chu Yinqing, the leader of the sand puppet sect. How was it worth it? The young man couldn't help but ask. The Heaven's Pivot Holy Land has said that as long as we can capture this demon god Lin, they will allocate a blessed enclave in the ancient Song province as a reward. Speaking of the blessed enclave, Chu Yinqing's eyes lit up. For thousands of years, the sand puppet sect had been living in this desolate desert. If they could move their sect to a blessed land, it would be a great opportunity that was hard to come by. Unfortunately, the blessed enclave in the ancient Song province was almost controlled by the Heaven's Pivot Holy Land, so Chu Yinqing could not find the opportunity. But now, the opportunity had come. In the past, we could obtain an endless supply of materials from the desert to refine sand puppets. But now, our sect has reached a bottleneck. If we want to break through, we have to fight. Chu Yinxing looked determined. So, no matter who it is this time, as long as he dares to appear, he will not be able to escape. The young man was stunned. He still did not understand. Was it really worth it? Swish! Not long after, a handsome figure swept over from the horizon. His black hair was flying in the wind, and he looked extraordinary. It was Lin Sun, but this time, he did not hide his appearance. Demon Lin, the young man shouted, and his pupils shrank. He had never thought that they would really catch this guy, wanted by the heavens, pivot Holy Land. Demon Lin, you have no way out. Stay. Chu Xiuqing shouted, and he could not hide the excitement between his eyebrows. He pointed to the distance. Do you see that? In order to deal with you, I have taken out a total of 800 battle sand puppets. Not to mention you, even a half step to the king realm can't escape. Lin Sun raised his eyes and saw a dense and neat number of sand puppets standing in the desert, like an army. Each of them was full of killing intent, as if an army was pressing on the border, giving people a kind of oppressive atmosphere. Some of these sand puppets were shaped like tigers and leopards, some are shaped like birds, and some are holding weapons such as swords, spears, and halberds. They seemed to be inanimate objects, but they exuded an aura no weaker than that of an expert in the reincarnation developing realm. Are you sure these things can stop me? Lin Sun asked. Yes. Chu Xiuqing was full of confidence. But the young man next to him had a bad premonition, because Lin Sun was too calm and composed. From the moment he appeared until now, he did not show a trace of panic at all. It was as if in his eyes, the army of 800 battle sand puppets did not exist at all. However, when a young man wanted to remind him, it was too late. Clang! Lin Sun made a move. A broken blade like a snow-white, divine rainbow rose to the sky, and the sound of the blade was like a dragon's roar, shaking the world. In an instant, in the eyes of the young man, Lin Sun seemed to turn into a demon. His whole body was surrounded by clear brilliance, and his breath suddenly became terrifying and boundless. Like a big abyss, it stretched across the world and wanted to swallow everything. Oh no! The young man was so shocked that his heart almost jumped out of his throat. At the same time, Chu Xiuqing's face also changed. He waved his sleeves and shouted, "Tut!" Boom! Suddenly, 800 battle sand puppets launched an attack like an army and rushed towards Lin Sun from all directions. Some spewed thunder, lightning, wind, and fire. Some tore the void with their claws. Some waved their treasures and actually executed terrifying secret techniques in battle. As far as the eye could see, the battle sand puppets released different kinds of power as if they were not afraid of death. The momentum was extremely terrifying. As Chu Xiuqing said before, under such a siege, even a half-step King Realm cultivator would not be able to escape. But in the face of this scene, Lin Sun was not in a hurry. He casually made a long-prepared attack. Whoosh! At this moment, the dreamlike broken blade that was snow-white like snow was dazzling like the sun, and it left a sharp ray of light that was over 10 kilometers long in the sky as it slashed down. The heavens and the earth returned to silence, and all sounds seemed to have vanished. Only the might of this slash shocked the world, and it became the only wisp of light in the heavens and the earth. Puff! Puff! The battle sand puppets, which were as strong as reincarnation developing realm experts, were crushed into powder, annihilated, and disappeared like paper under this slash. In an instant, the army of sand puppets that rushed up was forcibly cut open. The crack extended from the void to the earth, as if it was indestructible and unstoppable. All the battle sand puppets near the crack were like stains on a canvas, wiped out by an invisible hand. The young man's heart turned cold. Although the sun hung high above his head, he felt as if he had fallen into an ice cave. One strike destroyed 137 battle sand puppets. Even a half-step King Realm cultivator could not do this. Chu Xiuqing was stiff and dull. The excitement in his heart had long disappeared. Every sand puppet was the result of his painstaking efforts, and it was extremely difficult to refine them. But now, before he had time to show his power, more than 100 of them were destroyed. This was such a heavy blow that he almost coughed up blood. "Can you stop it?" Lin Sun withdrew the broken sword and said this. Without looking at Chu Xiuqing and the others, he flew away. "Can you stop it?" Lin Sun's casual words were like a knife stabbing into Chu Xiuqing's heart. He looked painful and lost. In any case, he could not imagine how the young Demon Lin could be so terrible. "Leader, Demon Lin has shown mercy," the young man comforted. "At least, he didn't kill them all." Chu Xiuqing looked miserable and murmured, "Yes, it's all because we overestimated ourselves." Then he took a deep breath and said resolutely, "Release the scene just now. We have already experienced this kind of loss. We can't let others repeat the same mistake. Maybe this is the only thing we can do." The young man nodded and accepted the order. He had a hunch that the reason why Lin Sun did not kill them all was that he wanted to use them to spread the news. This was nothing more than a show of power and a warning to those forces that obeyed the heavens' pivot holy land. Sure enough, the news caused a lot of turmoil in ancient Song state. It finally made other forces realize that the opponent they wanted to capture was not as simple as they thought. On the contrary, this was an extremely tricky and terrifying young man. Whoever wanted to deal with him would have to first consider whether or not they could withstand the blow that they were dealing with. As for the Xiozha that did not participate in the operation, they all sighed inwardly. If it wasn't for the strong, they wouldn't have crossed the river. This demonic god Lin was really a mess. However, Lin Sun's performance made the heavens pivot holy land furious. On the same day, they sent more elite forces to chase him. If they couldn't capture and kill such a young man in their own territory, how would the heavens pivot holy land show its face? How would the cultivation world view them? Chapter 1009. The heavens pivot holy land was serious. In the next few days, Lin Sun was keenly aware of this. After crossing the absolute refining desert, there was a wild grassland with swamps. The damp mist enveloped the world. Lin Sun walked alone in it. At this moment, he turned into a gloomy young man, wearing the star-frost Taoist robe of the successor of the heavens' pivot holy land. The owner of this appearance was called Xian Xiu, the successor of the heavens' pivot holy land. He had reached the reincarnation developing realm and was proficient in tracking. This time, he should play the role of scout. Not long ago, he approached Lin Sun silently and tried to send a signal to lead his companions to chase Lin Sun. Unfortunately, he underestimated the power of Lin Sun's soul. Lin Sun, who had already noticed it, killed him in advance. Then, Lin Sun stripped off his clothes and tokens and swaggered into this person's appearance. The swamp was full of poisonous miasma, and the world was shrouded in gray. As Lin Sun moved forward, he sensed the inside of the wordless pagoda. The insignificance bow emitted a dull and obscure wave, suppressing a blue arrow and making it unable to move. Lin Sun couldn't help marveling in his heart. This blue arrow came from Xing Yitian. At the bottom of the random star shoal, when Lin Sun fought with Xing Yitian, a peerless figure of the Thunderwing clan, this arrow had burst out extremely terrible power in Xing Yitian's hands. If it weren't for the insignificance bow, Lin Sun couldn't collect it with his strength at that time. Even so, this blue arrow was suppressed by the insignificance bow until today, and then it completely stopped struggling as if it had surrendered. It was also at this time that Lin Sun finally saw the true face of this arrow. It was only 2 feet long, slender like a bamboo chopstick, completely dark blue, crystalline, and translucent. It seemed as if it was polished from a piece of pure blue jade. The arrow was like a crescent moon, engraved with dense and strange twisted Taoist patterns. Its sharpness was condensed with a kind of piercing sharpness. What really moved Lin Sun was that the tail of the arrow was engraved with 2 ancient inscriptions. Although the words had been worn out and faded, they could still be recognized. M.O. Li. It turns out to be this arrow. It suddenly occurred to Lin that bloodthirsty Queen Zhao Xingye once mentioned the name of this arrow in the bloodthirsty battlefield of Xiao Empire. In the ancient times, The Da'i tribe possessed 9 divine arrows that caused the world to tremble with fear. They were Bai Luo, Huang Quan, Shang Xie, Mo Li, Chuya, Ji Guang, Peace Feather, Soul Shi, and Invincible. Every single arrow was marvelous in its own way, and they possessed unimaginably terrifying might. Lin Sun had already seen the power of the blue arrow, and now it was stored in the wordless pagoda. Although the arrow was seriously damaged, it had been used by Zhao Xingye to kill several old monsters of the King Realm with the help of the insignificant Bao. But now, according to Lin Sun's judgment, the Moli arrow was definitely not weaker than the blue sky arrow. Moreover, it had its own wonders, and its power was unpredictable. After all, even the insignificant spiritual Bao had not completely subdued the arrow until today, which showed how extraordinary it was. General Zhao Xingye once said that the 9 divine arrows of the Da'i tribe were supreme treasures. It was said that if the 9 arrows could be combined into one, the ultimate fortune involving archery could be found in them. I don't know whether it's true or not. Looking at the blue Moli arrow, which was as blue as ice and jade, Lin Sun had an impulse to try the power of this arrow with the insignificant Bao. Suddenly, Lin Sun interrupted his thoughts and restrained his spiritual awareness. He noticed that someone was approaching. Xian Xiao, haven't you found the target yet? The yin and yang spirit lock mirror shows that the target is now in this swamp. A black-robed middle-aged man swept over silently like a large bird gliding through the air. There wasn't the slightest bit of sound as he tore through the air. No, Lin Sun was shocked. The middle-aged man in a black robe was a half-step king realm martial artist. His breath was restrained. It seemed that there was not much amazing power, but Lin Sun felt a trace of danger from him. This kid is really cunning like a fox. Since Jade Flame City, more than 10 disciples of our heaven's pivot sacred ground have died in his hands, and one of them was even a true disciple. This loss is not small. The middle-aged man in a black robe frowned, put his hands behind his back, and floated down 10 meters away from Lin Sun. 10 meters seemed to be an inconspicuous distance, but Lin Sun resisted the impulse to make a move, because he knew that even if he attacked suddenly, the distance of 10 meters was enough for the opponent to react immediately. Undoubtedly, this was an extremely cautious and powerful opponent who had been fighting for a long time. Xian Xiao, your elder brother asked about you yesterday. Suddenly, the middle-aged man in a black robe opened his mouth and looked at Lin Sun. He was still worried about your safety and advised me to send you back. Lin Sun was stunned, and a bad feeling suddenly surged in his heart. Was this old guy testing him? Otherwise, why would he say such words at this time? Boom! At this time, the middle-aged man in a black robe suddenly attacked. His speed was incredibly fast, as if he had been waiting for a long time. His whole body was like a black light, covering Lin Sun's head with a claw. Because the sudden attack of a half-step king realm was only 10 meters away, other practitioners were doomed to have no time to react at all. However, this was not destined to be a problem for Lin Sun. His figure suddenly flashed like an ice dragon and avoided the attack. Humph! It's really you. The old man in a black robe looked cold. His figure was like a ghost, and he turned his hand to attack Lin Sun. His body emitted a terrible black light, and his 5 fingers were wrapped with dazzling brilliance, like a peerless dragon claw, tearing the void. With a bang, Lin Sun collided with him. Although he resolved the attack, it made his chi and blood tumble. This surprised him. Countless half-step king realm experts had died in his hands, but it was the first time for him to meet such a strong opponent. Undoubtedly, the origin of this middle-aged man in a black robe was absolutely not simple. It was very likely that he was a ruthless figure in the heavens' pivot holy land. Without giving Lin Sun a chance to breathe, the middle-aged man in a black robe rushed to him again, and his killing intent was overwhelming, collapsing the clouds in all directions. Heaven's pivot demon suppression finger. Rumble. Above the middle-aged man in a black robe, black clouds rolled and blotted out the sky. The entire sky darkened at this moment, and the terrifying power of the great way filled the heavens and the earth, bringing with it a thunderous rumble. In an instant, a black finger that was 300 meters long appeared in the sky, like a pillar that held up the sky. The huge finger was branded with all kinds of extremely mysterious markings, and it was enshrouded in black light. As soon as it was formed, it caused the void in the area of 3,000 meters to collapse and wail. This attack was too terrifying. It was like the finger of a demon from ancient times had appeared in the world, and it revealed endless killing intent and fierceness. The middle-aged man in a black robe was in it, and his powers seemed to be as mighty as a god. The power of Tao, a peerless Taoist method. This old thing is really not an ordinary half-step king realm. Lin Sun's pupils suddenly shrank, and he felt an indescribable pressure. Boom! He didn't dare to hide his strength anymore. His spirit was burning like a furnace. In an instant, an ancient and huge fist broke through the air. The world trembled violently, and the color of the world changed. It was shaken by this fist. The bright and blazing light of Tao condensed on the surface of the fist, making it produce an invincible surging power. It was the 9 strikes for shaking heaven imprinted with the power of the Tao of water. When the two collided, the swamp instantly evaporated and dried up, and the earth cracked with countless shocking cracks and ravines. The terrible light of Tao and divine light spread and rumbled, like the divine thunder of the 9th heaven shaking the world, showing a scene of destroying everything. If such a confrontation took place in the city, it was bound to cause an unpredictable disaster. Boom! In the fierce collision, both of them flew out. Lin Sun narrowed his eyes. The strength of the middle-aged man in a black robe was unexpectedly strong. If it was another half-step king realm, he would have been easily killed. You can block it? You deserve to be the demon Lin who has stirred up trouble in Shiheng world. Among the talents of the young generation who have set foot on the top, you can be regarded as a top figure. Unfortunately, you met me this time. The middle-aged man in a black robe looked cold, and his eyes were surging with light. His breath was extremely frightening. Boom! Without hesitation, he attacked again. In a flash, the two had been fighting from the ground to the sky, rushing and killing and constantly changing the battlefield. The middle-aged man in a black robe was powerful as a god. When he deduced the peerless Tao, one after another huge fingers could be clearly seen bursting out, crushing the void and making the world roar. This was the Dubhe demon finger. When the finger was pressed, the sky collapsed, the earth cracked, and everything was broken. The scene was horrible. Lin Sun's body was surrounded by cyan divine light, which was as brilliant as a cyan sun. He deduced his own Tao without any sign of being suppressed. Clang! During the battle, the middle-aged man in a black robe took out a silver-white spiritual sword, which slashed continuously like lightning. This was a real king's Tao weapon. Its power was terrifying, and it was dazzling like a river of stars. Swish! The silver sword flashed through the sky, emitting a shocking beam of light. Its speed was incredibly fast, and it brushed past Lin Sun and cut off a strand of his hair. After that, a nearby 3 kilometers tall mountain was forcefully sliced into 2 and collapsed with a bang. How can this old guy be so strong? Lin Sun couldn't help but be shocked, and he took out the broken sword without hesitation. Clang! The broken sword was as white as snow. When it collided with the silver sword, a deafening bang broke out, and even the void exploded. Lin Sun realized that the real opponent this time was an old monster of half-step king realm whose combat strength was far beyond ordinary. The two fought fiercely, and the sky and earth were turned upside down. Wherever they passed, mountains collapsed, rivers dried up, and crisscrossed ravines were left on the ground. In the battle, the middle-aged man in a black robe was even more shocked. His realm was far superior to his opponent, and he was conceded that only a small group of people in the half-step king realm could rival him in the entire Dongxing world. But now, he was evenly matched with a young man. This seemed incredible. Boom! After another big collision, The power of the middle-aged man in a black robe became more and more terrible, and he suppressed the sky. Lin Sun's body was covered by the light, and he resisted it completely. Different from the past, it was the first time that Lin Sun was so strenuous, but this kind of battle also made his blood boil and his fighting spirit surge. Kill! The ultimacy of Yazi's wrath suddenly ran in Lin Sun's body, which made his power suddenly rise a lot, and he rushed forward. In front of him, the broken sword, like a flowing light crossing the void, set off a mysterious trajectory and cut down under the sky. Silence cut. The world returned to silence, and all things trembled. A breath of emptiness and annihilation spread and drowned the whole area. Chapter 10:10. Swish! The broken blade was silent and void, vanishing into thin air. The middle-aged man in a black robe was shocked. He dodged quickly and turned into a black light. He was shocked. He didn't expect that Lin Sun's power would increase so much in an instant. Lin Sun was like a monster that didn't play according to common sense. He had exerted all his strength and didn't hold back at all. Boom! The blade slashed down and cut off a mountain. The cut was smooth and flat. It collapsed and rolled down with a rumble, causing endless smoke and dust. Although he tried his best to avoid it, the middle-aged man was still in a mess. A bloody mark was torn on his back. His skin and flesh were torn open, his bones could be seen, and his blood was flowing. He couldn't help but let out a muffled groan under the pain, and his face distorted. Slash! Lin Sun didn't waste any time. He stepped into the void like an immortal and was surrounded by clear divine light. The broken blade swept out again. Damn it! The middle-aged man in a black robe shouted. The silver sword swept through the air, shining brightly and flowing with dazzling power of Tao. It collided with the broken blade. Clang! The collision was like a thunderclap. A great turbulence occurred in this place. The dazzling light drowned the world. In the end, the silver sword was slashed away, and a crack appeared on the blade. It was damaged. This was a real king's weapon, but it was damaged at the moment. The middle-aged man in a black robe was shocked. He had no time to care about the pain. Lin Sun's strength had completely exceeded his expectation. Originally, the Holy Land of Heaven's pivot sent him to fight because they realized that the opponent was a young man who had stepped into the peak of Tao. Only by sending him to fight could they have the confidence to suppress him. Unexpectedly, they had underestimated the terror of this young man. Slash again. Lin Sun's eyes flashed with cold lightning. His figure was like a great abyss across the world, emitting a power that made the world tremble. The middle-aged man in black was extremely difficult to deal with. If they didn't take this opportunity to kill him, he would only be a big trouble. In the blink of an eye, they fought for hundreds of rounds again, and the sky was dark and the earth was dark. But the situation had been reversed. The middle-aged man in black was completely suppressed. He kept coughing up blood, and more injuries appeared all over his body. Bang! Before long, the king's weapon in his hand was completely destroyed, and it turned into a rain of light. Lin Sun, on the other hand, was vigorous and decisive, not giving the black-robed middle-aged man any chance to breathe. This old fellow was too formidable. It was the first time he'd encountered such a half-step King Realm expert that was so difficult to deal with. This caused Lin Sun to be shocked in his heart, and he realized that there was a difference in strength even amongst half-step King Realm experts. For example, this black-robed middle-aged man was absolutely a top figure in the half-step King Realm. Kill! Lin Sun shouted, and his figure became more and more dazzling. There was a kind of domineering spirit of the devil pushing the opponent in the void. However, the black-robed middle-aged man seemed to have noticed that the situation was bad, and he withdrew resolutely and actually fled towards the distance at this moment. When Lin Sun was about to chase after him, he suddenly noticed that there were powerful breaths sweeping towards him from the distant horizon. Obviously, these were the reinforcements sent by the heaven's pivot sacred ground. This made Lin Sun squint his eyes slightly. Although he was unwilling in his heart, he finally restrained himself. At this moment, it was not the best time to start an all-out battle with the other party. Once they were entangled, The consequences would be unthinkable. The next time we meet, I'll definitely take your head. After saying this, Lin Sun drove the vast universe arc and flashed towards the distance without hesitation. The black-robed, middle-aged man's face was livid, and his eyes were bloodshot. He stared fixedly in the direction that Lin Sun left in, and his heart was filled with rage and humiliation. With his status, he was actually defeated and seriously injured by Junior. This was absolutely an extraordinary shame and humiliation. Martial Uncle 1. How could this be? It wasn't long before the group of successors of the heavens' pivot sacred ground rushed over. When they saw the black-robed, middle-aged man bathed in blood and heavily injured, all of them were shocked and in disbelief. The black-robed, middle-aged man was called Wen Xingzhou, and he was a famous top figure in the heavens' pivot sacred ground. Amongst the half-step king realm experts in the world, he could be ranked in the top 30 of Dongxing world. After all, there were tens of thousands of states in Dongxing world, and there were numerous orthodoxies and tens of thousands of clans. There were definitely many half-step king realm experts. Moreover, when Xingzhou could be ranked in the top 30 of Dongxing world amongst the half-step king realm experts, so it could be imagined how shocking his combat strength was. But it was precisely such an extraordinary figure that was injured at this moment. How could the successors of the heavens' pivot sacred ground, who had rushed over to support, dare to believe this? Martial Uncle 1, what's going on? Someone could not help but ask. We've all underestimated this demon god Lin's combat strength. When Xingzhou took a deep breath, and his face was gloomy and cold. Inform the sect immediately. It's time to mobilize our true strength. If possible, I hope to mobilize the core disciples of the reincarnation developing realm as well. He did not explain further, because it was too humiliating. But when they heard his suggestion, their expressions changed. Core disciples were the top strength of the younger generation of the heavens' pivot sacred ground. For example, Chu Beihai was one of the leading figures among the core disciples. Compared to him, the true disciples were a notch lower. In the entire heavens' pivot sacred ground, there were countless disciples, but the number of core disciples could definitely be counted with one's fingers. They were definitely rare existences. Isn't this a little too rash? Someone asked. Demon God Lin has already set foot on the peak of the same realm, and his combat strength is outstanding. Fighting against him can be regarded as a form of training. I believe that if those core disciples know that there is such an opponent, they will definitely attack without hesitation. When Xingzhou said, "You should know that the great battle of the world is coming. Only by fighting against the top figures of the younger generation can you demonstrate your strength." In a deep valley in the mountains, Lin Sun was meditating quietly. 3 days had passed since the battle with the black-robed middle-aged man. In these 3 days, Lin Sun encountered several obstructions and interceptions along the way, but most of them were motley crew that obeyed the orders of the heavens' pivot sacred ground. Before Lin Sun could show his strength, these motley crew suddenly scattered. Obviously, they had all understood Lin Sun's strength. The reason why they obstructed him was nothing more than to obey orders. There were very few who actually dared to fight against Lin Sun. For Lin Sun, although this kind of obstruction was not dangerous, it was very troublesome, because with these obstructions, his whereabouts were exposed all the time. It was almost impossible to get rid of the pursuit. However, in this kind of pursuit, Lin Sun's potential was unearthed. The cultivation that had been suppressed for a long time finally showed signs of breaking through the realm. This was a sign of a perfect breakthrough, just like water overflowing when it was full. If Lin Sun had broken through for the sake of advancement, he could have stepped into the late stage of reincarnation, developing as early as when he crossed the boundary river. At this moment, Lin Sun was trying to break through. As long as he could break through, he would have reached the last step of the reincarnation developing realm. At that time, his combat strength would definitely double. If he encountered someone like the black-robed middle-aged man again, he would no longer be a threat. Rumble. Lin Sun meditated quietly. In his body, there seemed to be mountains colliding with each other, making a roar. That was the aura caused by the operation of the power in his body. It was as majestic as an abyss and as vast as the sea. In terms of cultivation and solid foundation, few people in the world could compare with Lin Sun. It seemed that his advancement speed was slow, but every step was extremely solid, and the tempered foundation showed an extremely perfect state. It was also because of this that he could defeat those in the same realm and kill a half-step king. Buzz, wisps of light, green divine light, enshrouded Lin Sun's body, making his sitting cross-legged figure be enveloped in a layer of dreamy and illusory, holy aura. As time went by, the sun set and the moon set. Unconsciously, Lin Sun had meditated for a day and a night. The aura around his body became more and more abundant, like a burning furnace. A divine wheel was revolving in his body, releasing a magnificent and blazing luster. It was already evening, and the valley was quiet with the setting sun. In the distance, ape cries and tiger roars could be faintly heard. It's him. This kid really doesn't know death. He actually dares to meditate and cultivate without any concealment. Is he tired of living? Be careful. We're waiting. Go inform the others to hurry over here. At the entrance of the valley, a group of successors of the heavens' pivot holy land were quietly communicating with each other. In their eyes, Lin Sun was indeed too arrogant. He just sat on a rock in the valley and cultivated without concealment, as if he didn't worry about danger at all. However, because of Lin Sun's fame in the past few days, these successors of the heavens' pivot holy land didn't dare to act arbitrarily. They thought that there was a trap and had to be on guard. He seems to be about to break through the realm. It seems that he also realizes that the situation is not good and is eager to become stronger. Humph, he is delusional. A day ago, the sect sent 6 core disciples and a group of half-step King Realm strongmen. Under such circumstances, it's useless for him to become stronger. Anyway, this guy is really terrible. Let's wait here. Even if he is defenseless, we can't deal with him. Those people talked. Although they thought that this was the best time to attack Lin Sun, they all resisted in the end. It could be seen that Lin Sun's performance along the way had made these successors of the heavens pivot holy land vigilant and afraid, and they didn't dare to neglect him at all. Unknowingly, night fell, and the valley was shrouded in darkness. There are no stars, no moon, and even the sound of insects and birds. In this silent atmosphere, there was a disturbing and oppressive atmosphere. At the entrance of the valley, more and more successors of the heavens pivot holy land gathered, and they hid there quietly without taking any action. Whoosh! Suddenly, a strand of dazzling flame appeared extremely far away in the sky, and it illuminated the sky. Upon closer inspection, it was the silhouette of a woman. Her body was graceful and slender, and her whole body was surrounded by dazzling divine flames. She walked in the void like a fairy walking out of the flames, which was extremely eye-catching in the night. Boom! In another direction, a majestic figure flashed through the sky. Every step he took, the void collapsed like a piece of paper, and the world trembled. Looking from afar, it was like a barbarian god walking between the mountains and rivers, which made the fierce beasts lying dormant in the nearby area scared to death, and they crawled on the ground and shivered. This movement was so loud that it broke the silence in the valley in an instant. The eyes of the successors of the heavens pivot holy land who were lying dormant at the entrance of the valley lit up. Chapter 10:11. Under the awe-inspiring gazes of the crowd, the slender and graceful figure shrouded in divine flames floated down to the ground. She was extremely beautiful and bright. She was dressed in a fiery red dress, and her snow-white and smooth skin was delicate. There was no doubt that she was an extremely beautiful woman. She stood there casually, with wisps of star-like divine flames shrouding her whole body. Even her black hair was suffused with a dazzling flame luster, and she had an imposing manner. Ling Hongjin. She was one of the core disciples of the heavens' pivot holy land, a peerless figure at the perfection of the reincarnation development realm, and her combat strength was unfathomable. At the same time, She was also one of the 4 proud girls of the Heaven's Pivot Holy Land. She was deeply loved and pursued by countless young cultivators, and her reputation spread far and wide. Boom! The earth shook, and smoke and dust filled the air. A majestic figure appeared. His eyes were like swords, his physique was like a mountain, and his muscles seemed to be made of bronze, giving people an oppressive aura. As he appeared, an invisible and violent aura spread out, making him look like an ancient barbarian god. Li Jianan, like Ling Hongjin, he was one of the core disciples of the Heaven's Pivot Holy Land. He was talented, unyielding, domineering, and powerful. When the two appeared, all the descendants of the Heaven's Pivot Holy Land who were lying in ambush at the entrance of the canyon stopped hiding and came out to greet them. On the other hand, Ling Hongjin and Li Jianan's gazes immediately swept past the crowd and landed on the rock in the canyon. There was a handsome figure sitting cross-legged there. As they looked over, the man also stood up and looked at them. Bang! In the blink of an eye, their gazes collided in midair, and it was like lightning clashing, causing an explosion to resound in the air. At the same time, the descendants of the Heaven's Pivot Holy Land nearby all held their breath and felt a terrible pressure spreading in the field. This was a contest of momentum. Ling Hongjin was like a fairy coming out of the divine flame. Her whole body was surging with a wanton and flamboyant divine rainbow of flames, which dispelled the night. Li Jianan was like a barbarian god. His majestic figure seemed to hold up the universe, giving people a feeling of infinity and greatness. He was like a mountain, oppressing all things, and was incomparably domineering. Lin Sun, on the other hand, stood there quietly. His tall and handsome figure was as ethereal as an immortal. He seemed to be completely calm, but when Ling Hongjin and Li Jianan's might spread over, it was soundlessly neutralized before it could even approach his body. Martial Uncle One is right. This child is the same type of person as us. He did not disappoint me. Li Jianan spoke in a low voice. His low and deep voice was like a thunderclap that rumbled and surged within the night gorge, and it terrified the hearts and souls of others. When he opened and closed his eyes, lightning flashed, and his eyes on Lin Sun were filled with a fierce and violent fighting intent. This is very normal. After all, he's a figure that's like a devil god that's thrown the West Ocean world into disorder. If he didn't have this little bit of ability, then why would we need to make a move? Ling Hongjin's red lips parted slightly. Her pair of beautiful eyes were like a pair of burning candles. There was a kind of wanton and ostentatious aura that no one dared to look directly at. Those descendants of the Holy Land of Heaven's Pivot all held their breath in concentration, and their hearts were filled with awe and fanaticism. These two were core disciples, peerless figures like divine dragons in the sky. In the past, they had been cultivating in the forbidden area of the sect. They were almost legendary, and it was rare to see them show up. But this time, in order to deal with Devil Lin from the West Ocean world, 2 core disciples showed up, which was enough to shock people. At the same time, Lin Sun was also looking at them. His eyes were very calm, and from the beginning to the end, he didn't show any emotion. In fact, he couldn't help but sigh with emotion in his heart. The foundation of the ancient orthodoxy was too terrifying. The peerless talents that were rarely seen in the world were common in these forces. Ling Hongjin and Li Jianan had obviously set foot on the peerless path, which showed how amazing the foundation of the Holy Land of Heaven's Pivot was. Why don't you run away? Li Jianan's eyes were like lightning, locking on Lin Sun. He was a little puzzled because, according to his judgment, if Lin Sun wanted to run away, he would have already left, and there was no need to wait for him and Ling Hongjin to arrive. I've said before, if you insist on being my enemy, then you have to think about whether you can bear my anger. Lin Sun's lips curved. Obviously, you didn't listen to my words. In that case, why should I run away? How arrogant! How dare you say such big words? Aren't you afraid of bursting yourself to death? Next to him, a successor of the Holy Land of Heaven's Pivot shouted. The other successors of the Holy Land of Heaven's Pivot also sneered. Didn't Devil Lin see the situation clearly? He was really arrogant to the point of ignorance and fearlessness. So you plan to fight back? Li Jianan was surprised and felt it was ridiculous. Yes, fight back. At least I have to let you feel my anger first. Lin Sun nodded, very calm. In my opinion, it's just a stupid thing to do in desperation, Ling Hongjin said indifferently. Her appearance was extremely outstanding, and her words were very calm, but there was a touch of arrogance in her words as she commented on Lin Sun. This was the ancient Song province, the territory of the Holy Land of Heaven's Pivot. But now, Lin Sun threatened to let them feel his anger, which made them all feel very funny. A person at the peak of the reincarnation development realm might be extremely powerful among his peers, but after all, he had not really grown up. How dare he talk so shamelessly? Was he tired of living? Give him to me. Li Jianan strode out. The earth shook, and the nearby mountains resonated, making his momentum extremely oppressive. Senior brother Li, you must suppress this devil and make him kneel on the ground to repent and atone for his sins. Yes, this man is rampant. He killed many of our disciples before, and blood must be paid with blood. This time, we can't let him escape. The successors of the Holy Land of Heaven's Pivot shouted. Be careful, don't force yourself. If you feel something is wrong, you can give him to me. A trace of ridicule flashed in Ling Hongjin's beautiful eyes. Humph, don't worry, I alone am enough. Li Jianan snorted coldly. Boom! He strode forward, and his aura suddenly changed. With every step he took, the ground would tremble, and his aura would also rise. Boom! 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 After he took 9 steps, his majestic body was steaming with dazzling golden light. It was as bright as the sun, illuminating the mountains and rivers, and its power was terrifying to the extreme. The ground cracked like a spider web. The rocks on the nearby mountains were shaken to the point of rustling and falling, and the void emitted an ear-piercing hiss. 9 steps of shaking heaven. This was a secret method of fighting that could make one's combat strength erupt with unprecedented power in a short period of time by activating one's own power. Undoubtedly, Li Jianan knew that Lin Sun was a powerhouse like him, so when he attacked, he didn't underestimate or neglect Lin Sun. He's too strong. He deserves to be a core disciple. When can we possess such power? The successors of the Holy Land of Heaven's Pivot trembled, and their eyes were full of fanatical worship as they looked at Li Jianan. Ling Hongjin nodded secretly. She was worried that Li Jianan would underestimate his opponent, but now it seemed that he was more cautious than she had expected. This was the right way to do it. After all, before they came, they had all heard that Elder Wen Xingzhou, who could be called the top in the half-step king realm, had suffered a great loss in the hands of this man. From this, it could be seen how tyrannical this man was. However, there was still a trace of confusion in her heart. Even if he was driven to desperation, there was no need to foolishly stay here and wait for death, right? I'll give you a chance to fight with me. Remember, use your full strength, or I'm afraid you won't die in peace. Li Jianan's majestic figure was filled with tide-like golden light, and his power was like a dragon soaring into the sky. This kind of momentum alone was enough to collapse the fighting spirit of ordinary reincarnation developing realm experts and make them feel despair. In the face of such provocation, Lin Sun stretched out 3 fingers and said, 3 punches. His tone was light, but this stunned the successors of the Holy Land of Heaven's Pivot who were clamoring. 3 punches? Did this guy say that he would defeat senior brother Li Jianan in 3 punches? Wasn't he too damn arrogant? Their faces all fell, and they were extremely annoyed. Ling Hongjin had a strange look on her face. She had long heard that Demon God Lin was extremely unscrupulous, but she didn't expect him to be so unscrupulous. 3 punches? Even Chu Beihai, the number 1 core disciple, didn't dare to say so. Brotherly, did you hear that? I'm going to kill you with 3 punches, she said with her beautiful eyes and a sweet smile. At first, Li Jianan also thought that he had heard wrong, but when he saw Lin Sun's calm and serious expression, he finally dared to confirm this fact. This made him uncontrollably reveal a touch of killing intent between his eyebrows, and his face also became cold. Was this a challenge to his dignity? He really didn't know what was good for him. The first punch. Lin Sun didn't say anything more and jumped out to attack. The wrath of Yazi operated. The profound meaning of the 9 strikes for shaking heaven surged. All the power in his body gathered in his right arm. And as Lin Sun took a step forward, the punch suddenly burst out in the void. It was bright, blazing, and powerful like an abyss. In the eyes of others, this punch was indeed powerful, but it didn't have much deterrent power. But for Li Jianan, he felt a terrible killing intent coming at him. In a trance, there seemed to be landslides, tsunamis, the collapse of the void, the roar of dragons, and the cry of phoenixes, and other destructive scenes in front of him. That kind of punch seemed to carry the will of destruction, and it could disorient people's mind. Li Jianan's hair stood on end. In an instant, his face became unprecedentedly solemn. Under the stimulation of that terrible killing intent, he didn't hesitate to use his strongest means at all. Suppress. He roared like the roar of the ancient barbarian god, and in his hand, a vigorous and rough palm print had already been condensed. W Sky Suppressing Seal. It was a first-class, peerless Taoist method at that time. As soon as it was displayed, the palm print was like a mountain falling from the sky, crushing the 5 elements, shattering the void, and seeming to be able to suppress and kill all living beings. Boom! The two collided, and the mountains near the valley collapsed with a loud bang. On the ground, the rocks and plants rustled and turned into powder. The unparalleled strength of the punch and the power of the palm print swept out, causing the void in the night to wail and shake. In the area far away, there were even the horrified roars of birds and beasts. In the field, Li Jianan's body seemed to be hit by a giant hammer, and he retreated more than 30 meters. His chi and blood were reversed, and his vision was dark. He was so uncomfortable that he almost coughed up blood. Everyone was shocked and widened their eyes. Ling Hongjin's beautiful face became dignified, and her whole body was burning with flames like a volcano that was about to erupt. How could the power of a punch be so horrible? This was something that no one had expected. Chapter 10-12. The second punch. Lin Sun's expression was terrifyingly calm. From beginning to end, there was no ripple on his face. He took a step forward and punched again. This punch was simple, natural, and didn't contain a trace of the aura of the mortal world. It was like an antelope hanging its horn, unrestrained, untraceable, and full of the charm of simplicity. In the eyes of others, the power of this punch was even inferior to the punch just now. It was too ordinary and simple. But Li Jianan's face changed greatly, because this punch already had a charm of great skill concealing clumsiness. It was a kind of simplicity after washing away all the magnificence. Every inch of his skin had a tingling feeling that it was on the verge of breaking, and his body and mind were enveloped by an indescribable force. There was no way to hide or avoid it. If he dared to show any trace of flinching or flaw, he was doomed to die. Break! Li Jianan let out a long roar. His long hair fluttered in the wind, and his whole body was covered with golden light like the sun. He exerted his strength to the extreme. 6 defensive forces of Zhou. Bang! 6 divine rainbows appeared in front of him, representing the forces of heaven, earth, east, west, south, and north. As soon as this technique was executed, it carried the aura of supremacy in the heavens and the earth. It was boundlessly overbearing, causing Li Jianan to seem like the one and only overlord that controlled the world. This was his trump card. With this method, he had killed no less than 10 half-step King Realm experts with his bare hands. Boom! When the two collided, the world seemed to explode. The turbulence surged and the haze swept across. The descendants of the Holy Land of Heaven's Pivot had long noticed that something was wrong, and they avoided it at once. Although Ling Hongjin didn't retreat, she had to run her power to resolve the aftermath of the terrifying collision. In the field, Li Jianan's body flew backward with blood oozing from his 7 orifices. He was blown hundreds of meters away, and the skin on his majestic body was cracked inch by inch and bleeding. His hair was disheveled, and his body was bathed in blood. He fell to the ground in embarrassment, splashing smoke and dust all over the sky. When he looked at the battlefield again, the gorge had already collapsed, and the mountains had vanished without a trace. The ground was filled with ravines and pits from the explosion. Lin Sun's handsome figure stood in the void, pure and ethereal. Against this messy and terrible background, he looked more mysterious and extraordinary. Everyone's expression changed, and they almost forgot to breathe. Li Jianan was a core disciple of the heavens' pivot sacred ground. Even amongst the younger generation of the East Victory Domain, he was one of the top figures. In the hearts of the countless disciples of the heavens' pivot sacred ground, the core disciples were like the sun in the sky. They could illuminate the world, lead the way, and were invincible. But now, Li Jianan had been blasted back twice in succession, and he'd even suffered a heavy injury. No one had expected this outcome. Because it was too shocking and sudden, the successors of the heavens' pivot holy land stood there in a daze. Ling Hongjin was extremely shocked in her heart as well. Just like Li Jianan, she'd already stepped foot onto the absolute peak, and she felt that only a small group of figures amongst the four great worlds of the region of ancient desolation would be able to compete with them when the Grand Era battle arrived. Originally, she thought that Lin Sun belonged to this small group of people, so she didn't despise him at all. But Lin Sun's combat power was so strong that it broke her inherent cognition. He wasn't a genius who'd set foot on the absolute peak, but a genius who defied the natural order. The third punch. Lin Sun attacked again. He was still calm and composed, and his temperament was extraordinary. This punch was beyond everyone's expectation. As soon as he attacked, the world, the universe, the mountains, the rivers, everything seemed to be frozen, and no sound could be heard anymore. It was too strange and silent. Only Lin Sun's punch swept out silently. The loudest sound was silent, and the elephant was invisible. The successors of the heavens' pivot holy land were very relaxed, because they didn't feel a trace of threat or a trace of power fluctuation. But Ling Hongjin's expression changed, and she cried out involuntarily, "Watch out!" At the same time, Li Jianan was also scared out of his wits. For the first time, he felt the threat of death. His intuition told him that he couldn't resist this punch at all. Swish! Without any hesitation, he fled. His speed was incredibly fast, and he didn't waste any time. However, although he was fast, the punch was even faster. In a flash, it had already arrived. Bang! It could be clearly seen that Li Jianan's back was punched with a bowl-sized bloody hole, and blood sprayed out. At the same time, his body seemed to be struck by lightning. He was stiff and stagnant in the air, as if he was imprisoned there. It was extremely strange. What kind of punch is this? Li Jianan turned his head and said in a hoarse voice. There was blood gurgling out of his mouth, but he seemed to be unaware of it. He just opened his eyes wide and looked at Lin Sun in the distance. His eyes were full of shock, confusion, and disbelief. Boom! After that, before he could even obtain an answer, his tall figure had exploded into pieces. At that instant, it actually gave others the feeling of shaking the heavens and the earth. Blood sprayed wildly, and it was scarlet and dazzling in the night. A core disciple of the heavens' pivot holy land, a talent who had set foot on the top of the world, died here and now before the arrival of the Great Era. And from the beginning to the end, as he said before, Lin Sun only used 3 punches. Everyone was shocked by this scene, and their minds were on the verge of losing control. Before, they all felt it absurd. They thought that Lin Sun wanted to defeat Li Jianan with 3 punches, which was absolutely nonsense, arrogant, and ignorant. But they never thought that after 3 punches, Li Jianan was not defeated, but directly killed. Ling Hongjin was also stunned and angry. However, when she looked at Lin Sun in the distance, who was still calm from beginning to end, she didn't know what to say. Shock? Yes. Anger? Yes. Disbelief? There were too. but there was no accurate word to describe the complicated state of mind he was in at this moment. Li Jianan's combat power was the same as hers. In the past, in the ancient Song province, there were only a few people who could fight against him, and these people were all from the heavens' pivot holy land. But there was almost no one who could kill him. The top figures, like the dragons in the sky, might be defeated by their peers, but it was extremely difficult to kill them. But now Li Jianan was killed within 3 punches. In the end, all the emotions in her heart turned into indescribable fear and chill, which surged all over Ling Hongjin's body. Although she was surrounded by bright flames, she didn't feel a trace of warmth when facing Lin Sun, who was not far away. It was very cold. It was as cold as falling into an ice cave. Her teeth couldn't help chattering, and her white and smooth skin was covered with a layer of goosebumps. Her beautiful and pretty face also became extremely pale. What kind of terrifying opponent was this? Was he really a devil? Otherwise, how could he be so powerful? It's your turn. Lin Sun looked over, with his black pupils cold and emotionless. These days, he had been chased endlessly, which had accumulated a lot of anger. Now it finally broke out. Killing Li Jianan was just the beginning. Next, he would launch a counterattack to let the heavens pivot Holy Land know that although he was alone and had no one to rely on, he was not so easy to bully. Run. Without any hesitation, Ling Hongjin turned around and fled. Not to mention her, even Chu Beihai, the leader of the core disciples, might not be able to subdue such an opponent. The most terrible thing was that among the forces chasing Lin Sun this time, there was almost no one who could balance him. This made Ling Hongjin realize that the situation was not good. The first thing she thought of was to escape and then report the news about Lin Sun to the sect, so that the sect could send more powerful forces to capture and kill him. But Ling Hongjin only felt dizzy, and the road ahead was blocked by Lin Sun's figure. Do you really want to kill all of us? You should know that the core disciples are the taboo of every ancient orthodoxy. Once one of them dies, they will definitely kill you at all costs. Ling Hongjin said fiercely with a pale face. Even if I don't kill you, you will kill me sooner or later. In this case, do you think you can threaten me? As Lin Sun spoke, he had already taken action without any hesitation. Who cared if he was a core disciple? Since he wanted his life, he would have to bear the corresponding consequences. Without any accident, after a while, Ling Hongjin was suppressed by Lin Sun, fainted, and collapsed on the ground. Then, Lin Sun looked at those descendants of the heavens' pivot holy land who had been scared out of their wits. Run. This guy is a devil. It's terrible. Those people fled in a panic, as if they had gone crazy. Their fighting spirit had long collapsed, and they even had no courage to face Lin Sun. Even Li Jianan was dead, and Ling Hongjin was suppressed. How could they fight against Demon Lin? Lin Sun had decided to fight back, so he naturally couldn't tolerate those who escaped to go back and leak his information. Immediately, he used Ice Drake steps and controlled the broken sword to chase them. Puff, puff, puff. In the night, blood burst out like firecrackers, but looked sad and horrifying. Lin Sun was not a butcher who killed people without blinking an eye. This time, he was also completely enraged by being chased. He didn't think that he had much hatred with the other party, but he was chased like a haunting ghost. Who wouldn't be angry? In the end, only 2 or 3 descendants of the heavens' pivot holy land escaped. However, Lin Sun didn't intend to chase them, because Silver had already taken action. If there was no accident, these 3 guys would die even more miserably. The power of the late stage of reincarnation developing realm is really powerful. Although it's just a step forward, it has doubled my combat power. In the future, even if I meet the peerless people of the same realm, I won't be afraid of anyone. Lin Sun recalled the scenes of the battle just now, and a sense of arrogance and self-confidence arose in his heart. This was a kind of invincible demeanor, the will of a strong man tempered by killing for a long time. Yes, Lin Sun had advanced. After 3 days of meditation in the canyon, his cultivation, which had been suppressed to the extreme, smoothly entered the late stage of reincarnation developing realm. Cultivation was the foundation of combat power. Although it seemed to be just a step forward, Lin Sun's combat power had been reborn.